welcome to Randolph and Martin Sports Talk on a Friday night. Unusual show this week. We're pre-recording this early on a Saturday morning because one of our guests lives the other side of the world. Today we're talking about, it's mainly about rugby because Wales have got Italy on the weekend. Can't overlook them. So yeah, today we've got, he's a Roman Welsh supporter. Back in his day, he was a scrum half, very Terry Holmes-esque, because I used to go and watch him in my local town. Welcome, John. How are you?
Diolch yn fawr. Welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me on to have a chat with you boys. And you know, Stephen, I remember teaching you in Johnstown Primary, and we nearly expelled you a couple of times, but you know, you hung in there. And but you know, one of the great things that memories I have of you in school there was the great sports teams we had, you know, in Johnstown at the time. And we were invited, you know, and at Johnstown, surprisingly, for a hardcore Welsh rugby town, Carmarthen, they only played football. You know, yeah. It was a big football school. And we were invited once to put our B team in the local district competition. And the final ended up with the A team playing the B team. And they never invited us to play the B team ever again then. Remember that, Stephen?
Yes, I do. I'll talk about that in a sec. We'll come back to that in a minute. Other guest on the show today is Jamie. He's an ex-100 metre sprinter from down South Wales as well. Competed in the Commonwealth Games, the World Junior Championships, the World Student Games. Very apt that he's on today because we'll probably end up talking about the speed of the Welsh wingers that we have at the moment. Welcome, Jamie. How are you doing?
Morning, guys. Nice to be here. Nice and early on a Saturday morning. Cheers, Steve. Thanks for that, guys.
I saw on your Facebook page. Obviously, I haven't seen you for many years, but obviously you've got a little one, so I knew you'd be up early in the morning anyway. That's why I invited you.
Typical today. He's still in bed.
Brilliant.
Just to let you know, here in Penang, in Malaysia, it's happy hour, so don't be bloody too long with this.
What time is it? Are you 7 hours ahead? What time is it with you now, John?
It's 9 o'clock. It's 5 p.m.
Well, that means you're going to have a drink at 11 then, Steve.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, just on that, I remember that well, John, the football. We both got to the final, and I think it was crazy. Even the B team were beating the other A team 7-8-1, and as you said, the next year we were only invited to have one team back. So yeah, it was good times back then.
Yeah, and you know, I remember all those boys. You know, one of which was Kevin Jones. Kevin Jones had the most amazing left foot. He reminded me of the famous Leeds United team and Don Revie, and they had a left winger called Peter Lorimer. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Jones had a similar powerful left foot kick. And you know what's great? I was back in Carmarthen that long ago, and he introduced me to his son, Dan Jones, who plays now for the Scarlets.
Yeah.
And when he introduced me to Dan, he was playing for the Wales under-20s, you know. And I thought, wow, what a lovely guy, you know. And I sat and had a great conversation with him. And so, you know, it's great to see that generation come through and have success as well, you know.
Yeah, he plays number 10 for Scarlets. He's you know, he's on the fringe. Obviously, they got Sheedy there now, who's a very good player, as you know, touching on the number 10 shirt with Bigger. We'll come on to names and things in a bit. But if we go back, there's no point touching on the Scotland and the Ireland game because we've been over that in previous shows. But if we look at the England game, as I said, for the last couple of weeks, the England fans have been non-existent. I couldn't get anybody on. I've got a few Liverpool fans. They don't want to talk about anything at the moment either. So it was a tough one to get them on. But yeah, the England game. To be fair, when the Autumn Nations were on before the Six Nations started, I wasn't looking forward to February or March because I thought we were pretty poor. Obviously, Pivac's only had a year, 18 months to bed the side together, in his style of play, which is very different to Gatland. I wasn't looking forward to it. And after the Ireland and Scotland performance, where, to be fair, both teams played very well against Wales, I thought we were probably second best. And you can never say we would have lost if they'd had 15 men, but obviously playing against 14 makes it a little bit easier. And we just scraped through both games. What were your feelings, Jamie, on coming into the England game after seeing those two performances?
My heart was always going to be Welsh. Always, never. To be fair, looking at Pivac, he had a hard job coming in. He had big boots to fill. I got to be honest. To come in after Gatland was a massive ask, and I think the Welsh wrote him off before we started. He's what he knows the young boys. They're coming in with, well, it's proved they've come out with a bit of class. Do you know what I mean? Zammit, Sheedy, he's given them the benefit of that. He's given them a run, and the boys are doing well. I think they're running and they're playing and they're enjoying, and I think that showed when we played England. But like I said, I was a bit dubious about coming to England. Like you said, internationals, they did look quite good, didn't they? But
I think yes, I was saying, your heart is always thinking, well, it doesn't matter who you're playing, but my head was thinking, and to be fair, I bump into people around here, English people, and it was like, and for some reason, they were more confident about Wales winning than I was, whether it was, like a double bluff but they genuinely, you bump into a postman and he's wearing his English cap and it's like, you're playing Wales on Saturday. Yeah. But, and they were more confident about Wales. So whether they saw something in England that I wasn't seeing, because yes, they didn't convincingly beat Italy, to concede 18 points against the team who are the last 2 or 3 years, the whipping boys, because obviously they've gone downhill. They're getting worse, not better. I wasn't confident at all. What was your opinion before the game, John?
Well, you mentioned earlier there, Stephen, Wales against Scotland, Ireland, 14 men, unfortunately. I recall going down to New Zealand for the second Lions test there. And, Sonny Bill gets sent off fairly early in the game. And we had to work so hard as a Lions team to win that game. So, when teams go down to 14, they step up their game, So, and Ireland and Scotland did that. So, even with 14 men, you've still got a challenge on your hands, So that isn't a huge disadvantage, in so much that the team then recognize, if you get somebody sin bin for 10 minutes, then it's, right, can we survive without giving any points away? But when you've got somebody red carded and you've got a long way to go, the team really steps up, as New Zealand did in that second test, as Scotland did, as Ireland did against Wales. So, although it was an advantage, yes, it's not a gimme. And then going into England, as you said, England in their previous games, and to be fair, people like Farrell and Itoje and Rina Pula, they have had match time, and I think that's shown tremendously. But, as you've read as well, one of the issues the England team, I think, have got at the moment is there's no leadership there. Farrell is not the captain. And, to give you an example, when they played Wales and the penalties that England are giving away at the moment, I'm so surprised nobody stepped in and said, right, guys, Itoje, for example, against Wales, 5 penalties, right? One person, and at crucial times as well. If that had been Ali Wynn, he would have said, you give one more penalty away and I'm substituting you, you're off, Whereas England was tapping him on the backside saying, hey, never mind, you're playing well. Load of nonsense. So that gives us, that puts England, that's where they're lacking. Having said that, I hope they beat France and then, the Grand Slam's ours then, isn't it?
I think you made a good point. Me and Martin were talking about it a couple of weeks ago regarding 14 men. It's a small advantage, and you've got to take that advantage, because if the other team, if you can step up by 10%, you're not going to do it I think he was probably sent off after 15, 20 minutes, wasn't he, O'Mahony? Obviously, the Scotland one was a little bit later. But you can increase your work rate by 10, 15% for a majority of the game, but you can't do it for the whole 80 minutes or the whole 60 minutes that were left. And luckily, Wales, at some point, you're going to have a purple patch. And they had that purple patch straight after the end of the first half. They scored their couple of tries, and that's where they won the game. But for the majority of both games, we were second best. It's the same in football. When somebody goes down to 10 men, you don't know who you're meant to be marking. Your game plan changes because it's like you're playing against a team who you haven't prepared for, because there's people playing out of position. You've got a centre playing as a flanker. So yeah, it definitely makes a difference. But for me, coming into the England game, the worrying thing was, how we played against the rugby team in front of us. For the majority of the games, they were better. So I was pretty worried. I think we definitely stepped up against England. They looked good going when they had the ball. They were very fast coming out of the scrums. When it was coming into the centres, they were coming up pace, and they looked like they were going to score pretty much every time they got into the backs. But luckily, our defence has been very good, so far this tournament. Because that was another worrying thing after Edwards went, was that what's going to happen with the defence. And looking at the autumn and the tries that were being scored against us was quite significant. So that was another worry. But I thought we played really well. What do you think of the backs performance, Jamie?
I felt they looked solid to myself.
Yeah.
They scrambled really well. I think the fact that we've now got two wingers who are, I think, class. You got the young boy Zammit, still got a lot to learn. I call him the apprentice because he is the apprentice. Then you've got North in the centre. He's still got the winger speed, so he can still go, but he's a unit. What is he, touching 17 stone?
Yeah.
And the boy can move. So the fact he's on the outside centre, potentially you've got three wingers on the pitch with Liam Williams in the back. And I've got to be, you can't fault that boy. Liam Williams, flawless. His defence is high balls. And again, he's got the speed as well. So I think if we needed a scramble, we did. They all scrambled one way, all scrambled the other. And I think the communication was A1 and Bigger, again, is kicking spot on. I know it went straight into Adam's hands. Again, we can talk about shortly. I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
But again, he was on the button with his kick in. I just think that every time they came forward, they didn't panic, they didn't rush, they just let them come, and that's why they looked as if they were going to score. I think what they done, they sat back and they thought, right, we can scramble this, boys. We're fast enough. We'll show them the outside, and the two boys will just push them in a touch if needs be. And exactly what they did. There was no pressure. I don't even think they batted an eyelid, the Welsh backs. That's my personal opinion anyway. They didn't look as if they were worried. I don't know.
Having said that, Jamie, the one name you didn't mention, which is a bit sad, unfortunately, because he's an ex-Commonwealth Athletic boy, John.
John,
he hasn't really got back to his own form yet, isn't he? And, but we've got a bit of depth there. And, that's good to see. And, one thing I loved about the England game, it was a little bit like a British Lions trial, wasn't it? Where you had Vinapula against Faletau, you had, what's his name, Tipperick. And then, you had the wingers, right? May, Josh Adams, Zammit. And, so it was really like, right, who's going to make the Lions, isn't it? Yeah. And a lot of the Welsh boys, and I say, Ali Wynne, as a captain, as a leader, as a setting an example, doesn't get injured, incredible, really. It's so great to see him, and I think in my opinion, he's played himself into the captaincy of the Lions. To be honest,
I agree, John. Yeah, definitely.
100%. He was immense. Hardy, scrum half, another, I think is, I don't know whether you played against his dad, Richard, Jamie. I think he was a Tumble, Pontyberem centre, ginger hair.
Tumble, don't mention tumble. Okay.
But yeah, I thought he played, his first real start for his country. His distribution, I thought it was quicker than the previous games with Gareth Davis and Williams. I thought he played really well. Before the game, I think Guscott pointed out that in the 2 or 3 previous games that he hadn't made a break.
Yeah.
And then within 10 minutes of the game, he made a fantastic break. But I thought he was superb. The speed of his passing, out from the scrums, from the breakdowns, just set the platform for that quick ball. I thought was excellent compared to the previous games. And then you've got, as you said, Bigger played well. But then when Sheedy came on, that was my only worry with not having Halfpenny there. And if Bigger wasn't playing, the previous games, Sheedy's been playing really well for his club. And, he's on point with his kicking. But when he came on and kicked those couple of penalties and conversions in the internationals, he hooked a few at the beginning. And I thought, is the occasion get into it? But against England, he was spot on. And he's kind of like a Gaza, a couple of his breaks, I think it was one, which is a shame that he missed Zammit on his right hand side and he kicked it. It would have been good to see a 70-meter foot race between him and Johnny May, which obviously didn't come off, and he nearly scored anyway with the kick. But his vision, is which you've seen if you watch a bit of him in his club games. He's fantastic, and he's definitely the future number 10. And I think he last week in the out of all the 3 games, he won man of the week, which is a good accomplishment when you've only come off the bench. So I thought they were, the halfbacks set up the performance. I think you're right, Jamie, about Foxy, because it's his first game back in international. He was solid. He didn't break any boundaries, but I think he did what he needed to do.
But it's interesting. I'm out here in Southeast Asia, and there's a school in Singapore, and the headmaster of this school in Singapore was the previous head of Millfield, where Sheedy was. Sheedy was a Millfield boy, and he was praising him so much. But one thing you sometimes ask yourself, what are these guys got between their ears? Because 2 examples now: Gareth Davis against Ireland, and there's 1 minute left on the clock, and he kicks ahead, and they get possession, right? And you think, what the hell is between his ears? And then against England, Sheedy, we scored that last try. There's about 40 seconds left. And he takes a quick conversion, which means they have to kick off again. And you think, what the hell is he doing? Just take your time. 80 minutes up, game over.
I think on that one, that was probably a little bit of inexperience. But on the first one with Gareth Davis, he's got he had no excuse. I think there was less than 20 seconds left, and that was just, and then you saw the experience. The Irish guy missed the touch, and obviously he's a youngster.
Yeah. You can expect that from the Irish. There's nothing between the ears there.
What was your thoughts, Mart, on the coming into the game?
Coming into the England game, like everyone said, they're always going to back Wales, but I think we said on the previous show leading up to it, it's one of those games where the form book just goes out the window and it's who shows up on the day and all the variables in the match. I think to a point we stayed in the game, and it was England's indiscipline ultimately that cost them. I have no idea how Itoje stayed on the field. I think we've been through this a few times already, but being caught offside in the maul twice as a professional elite rugby player, like, come on, mate. We'd usually get caught out once in school rugby and it's an accident, and you get away with it. You get caught and trapped on the wrong side every now and then. But he was just giving away stupid little fouls, like you said, and it's that indiscipline that cost him ultimately. You can criticise the referee's decisions. You can say there wasn't good communication when Adams sort of caught it in the corner. But as you said, Steve, part of the line was set. So in any rugby game I've played, if part of your line's set to the referee, your team's ready to go. So I don't really, sorry, budge my mic there. Don't really see what the issue was with there. But I think it's good to see the squad depth coming back a bit. I was a bit unsure about North starting at centre, but I think his ball carrying, because I think he'd had a few knock-ons against Ireland or a few handling errors, but his ball carrying looked much better. As I think it was Jamie that said he's got the size of sort of like a big ball crashing centre, but he's still got the speed of a winger. There was some questions whether he could still cut it as a winger. I know he's been in good form for Ospreys the last year, 2 years, but I think he'd had a lot of CTE issues. So it's like, has he got that extra 5% to sort of go for a loose ball? But if you've got someone like rees-zammit coming in, move north, sort of more central, so you've got a little mentor as 12's outside, 12's outside centre, right? So you've got him on Zammit's side, sort of giving him little tips, helping him throughout the game. You've got a 100-cap veteran on your inside, George North. That's going to give you the confidence, sort of having someone covering him behind that you can make those runs in. And he could easily be a sprinter for GB or Wales or something by the look of him. And that little chip kick over Stuart Hogg.
He's not quick enough yet. He's not quick enough yet. Obviously, I'll bring Jamie in on this. I was looking at the times, and I think Johnny May was running around 10:9, and Zammit's time on the internet is only 11:1. Yes, he's quick. But as Jamie will tell you in a minute, that's more than half a second slower than the women's Olympic time to get in. Because I do remember, and I'll bring Jamie on this in a second. I remember training on the track, and Jamie was on the track with a cricketing mate of mine, Peter Maitland, who ran for Great Britain. And when you see in the flesh somebody running and these guys have run 10.2, 10.3, and are up there with the elite. When you see a time of 11.1, the difference to me was in the first 20 meters. You can keep up with people when you're running from 50 meters to 100 meters, but the difference between somebody like Jamie and these rugby players, it's the first off the mark, the first 15 meters. I'd look at these guys and I'm like, how can you go from 0 to being 15 meters in the distance? That's the difference between a sprinter and a so-called speedster on a rugby pitch.
All right, so having that explosiveness out the blocks to, I guess that's what you.
Well, you'll bring Jamie in on this. What are your thoughts on that, Jamie?
Well, an example of initial explosive off the mark was Shane Williams. He made so much distance within the first 15 meters, and the fact he could step left and right was phenomenal. His first 15 was immense. Going back to, you said Sheedy kicked the ball through for Zammit, and it was a little bit of a foot chase between him and May. I don't know if you can remember it. Yeah. I've watched it a few times now, just to obviously do the speed and the hype. I like to have a look. If you actually look, Zammit's taking yardage out of May.
Yeah,
he's pulling away, and to do that is impressive. You know what I mean? And because May, I've seen him. He can move on a pitch. He's making people look as if they're standing still. So the fact that Zammit pulled the yardage out of him, and that was a short space of time, I was impressed. As far as like sprinting on a track, it is a little bit different. Obviously, when you tend to float on a track, so you basically clawing at the ground, like on a pitch. You got 15 other players that's going to smash you left, right, and centre if you're not fast enough, and they're big boys. So it is a little bit different. But like you said, it's speedster on a track is a little bit different to on a pitch. But I think when you watch someone pull yardage like Zammit did on May, to me, I would have given him a ticket there to the tour.
he does. You mentioned about like floating on air when you're on the track. He does look like he's floating on the grass as well, doesn't he? Compared to, he doesn't look like he's putting in a lot of effort, and he doesn't look like he's that quick. But because he's very upright, he's very like Michael Johnson-esque. and he doesn't seem to be making a lot of effort to go forward.
He's efficient, isn't he? He's a very efficient runner. You know what I mean? Even with the ball in hand, he can move. I think the fact he's young, he's quick, and I think he's there to play rugby. He's not concerned about anybody else. He wasn't concerned about me, even though he's on the same team. He went out there and he played his game, and I got to be honest, he won hands down. That competition with him and me, I would have put him in front any day of the week. Speed, agility, and like you said, the fact he floated was impressive. You know what I mean? To be fair, he did look like a sprinter. The knees were high. I did sit back and think, wow, this boy's got a bit of. I just hope now that he keeps that up. The tendency with wingers is to think they need to be bigger. The Lumo style, I would say, but then he was a different breed. He could run under 11 seconds and still be 19 stone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a different breed altogether. But the fact that, you know, I just hope he doesn't get too muscle bound, I call it. Keep his agility, keep his speed, and doing what he's doing and enjoying it. Because at the moment, he looks like he's enjoying his game. And I think it comes out and it shows the way he plays. You know, he is, I got to be honest, I don't want to put the stamp like everybody else is doing, but he's got to be on the line. So he's got to be there or somewhere. Myself, that's what I personally think.
On the point about his speed, you've got obviously George North was a sprinter, you know, in his school days. Nigel Walker, who you probably trained with, I would have thought, because you were same era. He was a sprint hurdler, and then converted to rugby. Whereas Zammit is a rugby player who is quick. He's, I don't think he's been a sprinter, and I haven't read anything about him being, a county sprinter or anything like that. So I do recall when Walker joined the Welsh team that obviously he was running under 11. You know, he was very, very fast. He eventually, he got the skills when he was able to. When he learned how to catch the ball, he got the skills. A bit like Peter Maitland, very, very fast. But you throw him the ball, you've got to put sellotape on his hand. But my question is, how does he keep that speed and improve from it? Because if he's doing sprinting on the track, obviously it's totally different. You've got your cadence. But I know there's a few stories that when Nigel joined rugby, his speed gradually decreased slightly. So how is Zammit going to increase it?
The way you can increase, obviously doing what he's doing now, I wouldn't change a thing. Obviously what he's doing is working. Game time, he's obviously getting game time, so he's obviously. The tendency is to think that you need to have bigger muscles on your legs, your bigger muscles here, there, and everywhere. But I think it restricts any type of move, especially his frame. He's got that frame where he flows, as we spoke about just now. I would just keep doing your speed work. If he does his sprinting on the track, keep doing his sprinting on the track. Don't let that go away. I think as an athlete, and I've played a bit of rugby, I think they should be hand in hand. The speed work should be done on the track. Your ball work done on a pitch. You will convert your speed onto the grass eventually. You will get used to running on grass. But I personally used to do a lot of running on. Well, I do it the other way. In Carmarthen, obviously they dug up the track while I was training, so I did a lot of running on grass to get the strength work during the winter. And then when the summer came, I got speed work on the track. In fact, it was in Johnstown, the old where the athletic pitch is. You know, the athletic pitch. They dug it up. I used to run up that big hill from the bottom to the top.
To the woods.
To the woods, and then he turn around and say, "You've got 3 minutes to get back to the bottom, and then go again." That you've got to find a good balance, and I think he at the moment has got that balance. I just hope he sticks to it. So whoever's looking after his speed work, it seems to be working for him. Personally, I think it's like I said, it's technique, running technique. He does look like a sprinter, as we've discussed now. He is upright, his knee lift, his arm action. In fact, he looks like Nigel Walker when Nigel Walker first came to rugby. But he's been, like you said, he's been rugby for a long time. So to have that technique is you can't go wrong.
the only thing when you talk about wingers, another sprinter was the JJ Williams. He was incredible as well, and he was a speedster in his time. And one of the great wingers for Wales. And the thing about wingers is, as you just mentioned, Jamie, there's different model of wingers. You got Shane Williams, Ham United boy, first 15 yards, side steps, incredible, right? Then you had the likes of John Olomo, who just steamrolls and knocks everybody out of the way, And then you've got like Zammit then, who's just naturally fast. And you don't need to change that really. No. The only question I've got about Zammit is, I don't think he's been tested yet in terms of his defense, and that will be a telling sign. He's shown at the moment in attack, going forward, he's really proving himself. My question is, what's he going to be like when suddenly it's at the other end where he's got to tackle or he's got to take that high ball? I don't think he's been tested enough in that respect yet, And then coming back to the England game, one of the things I read, which I found fascinating, was after England lost to South Africa in the World Cup, Eddie Jones said, right, I'm going to bring new blood in, let's start again, let's rebuild. And of course, the talent in England is incredible, right? They've got a young fly-half in Harlequins, who fortunately for us, he's not having a look in at the moment, right, Smith? And yet again, against Wales, 12 of the players were in that World Cup final against South Africa. So, he's not sort of delivering in terms of what he's saying. And I think England really need to sort of throw Farrell out, bring some new blood in, bring this young boy from Harlequins in, and get rid of Vinopola, who everybody knows his game now. First 10 yards, that's all he is. And he doesn't make that impact anymore. So that's where I think England is lacking. And I don't think they've got courage to say, okay, let's drop Farrell. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But yet I think they need to do that, in my opinion.
I think with the England game, yeah, you mentioned the players, but you mentioned the heart. I think it's if a team gets ahead of them, generally they lose. It's very rarely have they got the heart or the guts to really want it. If they're in the trenches, I know they hammered New Zealand in the semi-final, but when it came to the South Africa game, they just didn't have a plan B. They saw how South Africa played against us and against all the teams previously, and they did exactly the same against England, and they had no answer for it. It's like, surely they must have watched the games and had some kind of game plan. This is what they're going to do. Relying on a couple of different plays that they'd been successful for all the way through, and they just didn't, they didn't have that game plan. So whether it's down to the management, as you just mentioned, Eddie Jones, he hasn't gone through with what he said. He's stuck with his, I suppose his old cronies that he's had there for a few years, and brought in no new blood. Whereas Pivac's done the opposite. He's brought in. He's done some big calls, to bring in. He's brought on Sheedy, early on in the game. Bringing a forward on after 40, 50 minutes. That happens all the time. But to outside half, we'll be playing after 50 minutes, 40, 50 minutes. It's a big call. You're bringing on a guy who's 20, 21 in the pivotal position in a game where it's very close. So so the difference between the coaches, I think, made a difference. And coming back to Zammit, you said just now about players not having much between their ears. If you look at him, he's done some crucial calls. He's got the ball in hand. He's the quickest guy on the pitch, but he's kicking ahead, catching and scoring tries. He's not just running, trying to think, right, I'll get round this guy when there's a yard and you're not going to get round him. So he's got a footballing brain. Like what Shane Williams had. You get a lot of wingers who, I think, probably Watson on the England side. He relies on his speed. If he goes round the wing and he can't get round, he's going to get tackled. He doesn't kick ahead. He hasn't got what you've either got that naturally or you haven't. And I think Zammit's, he's been knocking on the door for nearly 2 years, but they haven't pushed him in. They haven't put him in because obviously he was only 17 and a half, 18. But they blood him at the right time. And yeah, as you've all said, he has to be on that plane. Even if I was an Englishman, perish the thought, or a Scotsman, I'd be saying, Zammit's got to be on there. Probably May is going to be on there as well. Adams, after one game, has proven that he's sharp enough, and he's got 2 more games now to prove that he can be on the plane as well. Obviously, he only didn't play because of his COVID breach. But I think they played. They played great. They deserved to win. And if we go on to the 2 controversial-ish tries, what were your thoughts on that, John? On the first one, the ref's decision to tell Farrell to go back and talk to his team, and then call play after a few.
Throughout my playing career, and it still applies in any sport really, you play to the referee, right? And when Bigger says, right, we're ready, and the referee blew his whistle, say, right, play on. Hey, you play to the referee, right? I think the knock-on was a little bit harsh. I think that, you just have to look at Zammit's face, where he knows himself he's knocked that on. So I think that one, I would have given that as a knock-on. But, that penalty, hey, you play to the ref, and I like the gracefulness of the English team afterwards, where they tried to pull them into that dialogue about the referee, and they said, hey, decisions have been made, we've got to reflect on it. And if you go back to the history of the game, this happens all the time. There are controversial decisions. You remember the World Cup when Scotland got knocked out against, I think it was Australia, in the semi-final, and the referee went straight to the tunnel after they blew up because he made a terrible decision, right? Which cost Australia a place in the final, right? Or semi-final, I'm not sure. So, historically, this happens, and you just play to the ref, and that's it, and the fact that we won by more than 14 points, then we still won the game, isn't it?
Exactly. Jamie, what were your thoughts on them?
Well, the crossfield kick, the first one, I don't know if you've seen the rounds, is a video going around of Farrell doing exactly the same for his club.
Against Edinburgh, yeah. Yeah,
and I didn't see Farrell making any complaints then. And I seen a bit of footage of apparently when he asked to speak to his team, it was the scrum half who called him in. It wasn't actually Farrell. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
They're up there, and they actually have. But like John said, it's one of those things, isn't it? So you don't switch off. You never turn your back on your opponents. And like Bigger did ask, ref, time on, and he's blowing his whistle and he's kicking it. So yeah, it's just one of those things. If England were always gonna complain if we score against them anyway, regardless of what we do or how we score a try. And Zammit's try, like John said, Zammit's face said it all. But but again, it goes down in ref's book as a try. So Liam Williams is happy with that. But I think Nigel Owen's given his opinion on that as well, and he's given it fact by fact of the rule book about the ball. Apparently, you've got to have proper control of the ball, regardless once it comes out of your hand. I was saying that the decision wasn't made by the ref on the pitch alone. You know what I mean? So they can call the ref all they want. He actually went to the TMO. They had a big discussion about, and they both came to the same agreement. So, you know what I mean? The fact that there's pictures of the referee with a Welsh jersey on doesn't make me chuckle, but, you know what I mean? It's one of those things, again, what can you do? And it was a try.
Well, it took them 2 or 3, as you said, it took them 2 or 3 minutes to, to deliberate over it. It was over and over again, back and forth. Yes, he didn't have control of the ball, but then on the other hand, it's hit the back of his calf. Whether it went forward or backwards, it hit his foot. you know, it's a lot of the time, if he's coming out to the outside half and he catches the ball, if he loses control of that ball slightly, but then kicks it 50 yards, is that going to be classed as a knock on? You know, there's so many interpretations. You're not going to be able to kick the ball out of your hand unless you hold it for 2 seconds. That would be the next rule. But as you said, yeah, it went to TMO. It wasn't the ref. You know, so there's 2 or 3 people, you know, professional people who should know all the rules, deliberated on it back and forth on the TV. Everybody was waiting and could see it. Personally, I thought, yeah, definitely a knock on. You know, 100% that's a knock on. Even if it was, you know, we would have won by 9 points. So that was more of a cert. But you know, on the first one, you know, as John said, you know, it happens all the time. People make, you know, decisions that go for you or against you. Sometimes, a lot of the time, you know, it goes against you. You brought up one about the World Cup, John. Another one would have been Warburton being sent off for the tip tackle against New Zealand. Was it New Zealand? Yeah, it was New Zealand.
France.
Was it
yeah.
France.
Against France. Yeah, sorry, against France to get through to the final. You know, that was our biggest chance of ever winning the World Cup. That was our best side that we had in the past 20 years. And that went against us with the French, with the referee. So sometimes it goes for you. But yeah, the footage, you know, you look at the footage a couple of times and the backs on the right-hand side of the pitch were already lined up. They were there waiting. So Bigger naturally looks at the other side, sees there's nobody there. Yes, ref, you know, when are you going to call? And, you know, and that's not telling the ref to, you know, to do it. He's asked him the question, when are you going to blow the whistle? And he blows the whistle. He knows there's no one over there. He's obviously given the nod to Josh Adams, and they scored the try. I think one other point was that Farrell was making. Hold on a second, you know, you can't do that. Not so much because we're in a huddle, but there's water boys still on the pitch. But then that argument is blown out of the water, as Jamie said. If you look at the footage of Farrell against Edinburgh for his club, there's a water boy standing 2 yards away from him when he kicked the ball into the corner for Chris Aston to score. So whichever way you look at it, the scorebook in history shows that we won. And in history, some of the other games show that we've lost games by 2 points and 5 points where we've been robbed as well. So it's horses for courses. And I think the interviews after, they, you know, as you know, one of you said, the English guys, Farrell and then Eddie Jones, you know, the Aussie coach, they did really well. They were questioned by I can't forget her name, Jill, the Scottish woman, and I thought her questions were awful. She was basically baiting them into saying something bad, and they would end up, you know, in some kind of disciplinary. I thought she was, and I saw a lot of stuff on social media afterwards, and she was getting a roasting because
I was going to say, didn't a load of people, I think it's Sonia McLaughlin, isn't it? Loads of people giving her an earful on Twitter and that, and apparently she went to a car and had a bit of a cry. And you should never, you know, verbally abuse a journalist to the point where they're going to their car after a match and crying. That's just despicable. And at the end of the day, it's people that if they met her in person, same with the ones who slag footballers and rugby players off, you guarantee if they met them in person, they'd be like, oh, hey, how you doing, bro? Can I get a picture? Love your work, blah, blah, blah. But you've got the anonymity of social media and they're using VPNs. So, you know, if they say something racist to someone, Twitter gives the account to the police. How are they going to find them? It's a VPN. It could be in Kazakhstan, could be in Afghanistan, could be in Australia, New Zealand. Can't really do a lot. But I don't know if I don't know if it'll be the questions she wrote for the interview and chose to ask, or what her producers were trying to get her to say. But it always annoys me when it happens in MMA a lot in the UFC. You'll get the journalists at the press conferences after, and you can tell they'll just be asking stupid questions to try and bait fighters and Dana White and the coaches into saying stupid stuff. It's just to make headlines at the end of the day. And I think it's good on the English that they weren't sort of fit into that rhetoric. Like, yeah, it was the referee that cost us the game. We were cheated out of the points, blah, blah, blah. Because you weren't. I mean, I'm always going to be biased being Welsh, but it was your indiscipline that cost you the game. There are a few marginal incidents with the referees, but you get them over the course of 10 years playing rugby. Like, how many How many times has the ball been at the bottom of a pile of bodies in a ruck right on the try line, and they're using every angle of the TMO to try and see if it's touched down, and they can't see, and it's just a bit of a guess whether it's a try or not. Same with, has there been downward pressure applied on this? It's a bit of a, it can sometimes be a subjective decision. You see it in football, but I think you said last week, Steve, if you pretend to know every single rule in rugby, because they change every year, basically, you're full of yourself. So the fact that the referees are mic'd up and you hear them going through the decision making, I think it gives a lot more accountability than, say, in football, for example. You see with VAR, they go to Stockley Park, and then 2 minutes later, the referee's like, "Oh no, that wasn't a goal kick, penalty." And it's like, "Wait, what? How did you come to that?" But at least rugby referees, you can hear them talking, and there's the accountability there, and I quite like that.
Well, you talked about Nigel Owen, he is a legend. It was interesting, May's try, I think it was against Italy, where he miraculously jumps in the air and he scores a try. And of course, Nigel Owen is saying that's illegal, because you imagine if you tackled him in the air, that's a penalty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? You're not allowed to tackle a guy in the air, and he's totally off the ground. So it's such a complex game sometimes. And as I said, you play to the referee. You look at that last Lions test in New Zealand, right? And that last minute when old Ken there, holds the ball and then lets it go, right? Okay. And then the referee's given a penalty, and then old Warburton, tactfully has a word in his ear, and he changes his mind, right? So you play to the ref. And this is where England is going wrong. Farrell is developing such a negative reputation amongst everyone now. When he then went and had a earful with the referee, brought the barriers down and said, "Hey, go away. I've made my decision." So, and I notice Alan Wynne is much more tactful when he goes to the ref, and I think that's an aspect of the game that I feel is beginning to spoil the game. We all, when we played rugby in the amateur days, you'd say, you wouldn't dare say anything to the ref because it was 10 yards, right? Because now, they are having a go, and they are turning to the linesmen and saying, "Hey, what about this and what about that?" I think they need to cut that out and bring back, more of this discipline. Say, you open your mouth and I'm giving you 10 yards, and whatever else, because it is getting a bit too much, but Farrell, to me, I wouldn't pick him on the Lions, to be honest. I take him as a water boy, maybe, but that's about it.
I think I agree with what you just said there. It's starting to creep in that, the captain is meant to be the only one talking to the ref, and now you can see a bit of gesturing from other players, and yeah, it does need to be cut out, because it's only recently, this is, as you just mentioned, Nigel Owens, this isn't soccer, it's rugby, and it's creeping in. It's creeping in. But yeah, so a great game, great win. Moving on to obviously Italy on the weekend. It's hard to not overlook. It's hard to overlook them because they have beaten Wales in the past when they shouldn't have. They haven't won a game for 6 years in the Six Nations, but there's always a game where they could turn it around. I think the one word, if I was in the Welsh camp, would be complacency. That's the one thing that they can't be. I know that there's 7 Welsh players playing this weekend in club games. They're looking to, I think they're looking to rest Faletau. Bigger's got an injury, so he's resting for a week, and there's rumours that they might pick Sheedy for the Italy game, which is fine by me. It gives him an extra week to rest, so they'll have 2 fully fit number 10s. But I think Jonathan Davies is going to play in his for his club to give him more game time, which is a bonus. But what are your thoughts on that, Mart?
Yeah, I don't think you can say it any better than you did, to be honest. Against the Italians nowadays, it is just a case of stick to your game plan. Don't get complacent. Don't think you're going to run in 40 unanswered points because, they scored 18 against England. And we've spoken about England before. I don't really think they necessarily have an identity playing rugby at the minute. They used to sort of be about big ball carriers, like sort of quick backs, but they've just enough about England. Why are we still bloody talking about them? Italy are a bit of a
You
weird.
are, we're not.
I know, yeah, I'm just riling myself up now. Sorry, gents. Italy are I've always wanted them to do well, but they just always seem to sort of get to a point where it's like, yeah, Italian rugby seems to be on the rise. I think Parise was a big driving force in that. Now he's gone. They haven't really got that talismanic figure in the side. It's just a case. I think, like you said with Sheedy, I'd start him definitely. I would start Hardy as well, but I think he's out the rest of the tournament now, hamstring something. So this is probably the game where those fringe players, or sort of the ones who've been doing okay coming off the bench, this is where you trial them in a starting game. And then you have your finishers to come off and salvage the game if it comes to it. Hopefully it doesn't, but you've got, you've got some of the front rows. Rodri Jones and Leon Brown have looked really good coming on in the scrum, been very stable. I think we've got an abundance of back row forwards nowadays. I think, Lydiat's out again, unfortunately, but Navidi's just come back fairly recently. Was it Wainwright that started the other day or came on? He looked really good presence at the lineouts. Tipperick as well. Just, it's like having an extra winger on the field with his footwork and everything, isn't it? Yeah, I think Italy be a good chance to try a few new players out, try a few different, not necessarily game plans, but maybe try a few different set pieces or a few different set plays, just see if they can work in a match situation. And then it's just a case of sort of getting a bonus point, so we have the extra point on the table, and then getting the confidence in the side going into France. If we can put a big score past an Italian side not playing our full strength team, I think that will galvanise a side going into the final week. And it's that head of steam you need going into a deciding match like that. I don't think France-Scotland went ahead, did it, because of COVID, etc. So it's a case of whether their games are actually going to... I haven't really been looking into this. Have they said what's happening with all of that? Are they going to allow them to continue to play, or...?
Yeah, even if they had, I think it was 10 players and 4 coaches. Like 10 players and 4 coaches have had COVID, and I think it was the wrongdoing that they did. I think Galtier went to watch his son in a game, and 4 of their players went for, I think, pancakes or waffles when they were playing against Italy. So 14 of their playing staff caught it because of those 2 indiscretions, and there was an hour-long discussion with the French government, and they've allowed them to carry on, because I think their coach was on the verge of pulling them out of the competition before they were probably thrown out if he was making noises like that, because you'd never throw your team out if you knew you were going to be allowed to carry on playing. But yeah, they're allowed to carry on playing. Obviously, we'll talk about the French game in a minute, but coming back to the Italy game, Jamie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, Italy, like you said, they haven't won for 6 years now, and Martin just said, like, Prise's gone, a big figure, and I always rated Prise. You've got to be one of the best number 8s around at this time, when he was in his prime. At the moment, we do want them to be the potential banana skin. Go in there thinking, we're all right, Jack. We've got this sewn up. It's only Italy, and end up doing something that we don't stick to our game plan. Martin said, stick to your game plan, but try the boys out. But also, like you said, have the boys to come in if we need to, like, mop it up, ensure that we do win. Because if we go in there confident and underestimating Italy, I know, you never underestimate any team. You never know what's going to happen on a pitch. It's 80 minutes. Injuries, referee giving wrong decisions. You never know what's going to go on in a game. So it may go against this week. We don't know. But yeah, we just go in there confident. Keep the game plan. Stick to the game plan. Give the boys a run out. See how they settle down. See how they get on. Like you said, Sheedy, be good for him to get out and start the game.
Yeah.
because he's got something about him with ball in hand, as you did say earlier on, Steve. He's got something. I don't know. He seems to want to run with the ball and make those gaps, which is something that Wales need at the moment, rather than just kicking. So if he sticks to his game plan, go forward, get that bonus point, as Matt said, get the job done, move on, and let's take on France the week later, hopefully with that bonus point, and let's pick up that.
What I'd like to add in here is, I must be honest. I've watched the Italian game so far, and they've played well. Yeah. Right? They've scored some great tries. And although they've been the whipping boys, they can score tries, they can run with the ball, they've got a great set. The halfbacks are quite talented. So, and in today's professional era, I don't think there's going to be complacency. Wales aren't going to go there and thinking, okay, this is a formality. That's not going to happen. We've learned a lesson from that in the past, and I think they're going to go there, consolidate, solid win, bonus point, and then, wait for the big. The chance they've got, as you've all said, is let's give these guys that we want to shine a chance. Jonathan Davis is one, right? Right, Jonathan, here's your chance now to get back to form, And, one guy we've not mentioned, and I think that he's had a great season so far, and that's Adam Beard, second row, right?
Yes.
I'm so impressed with him. Young boy, big boy. And Ali Wynn gives him so much confidence, and he really has shone this year, in my opinion, whereas last year didn't quite rate him, whereas now I think he's got a future ahead of him as one of our great second rows, So yes, but you look at the back line you've got, you probably, Thomas Williams will be back in because of the injury, right? I think they'll play Sheedy. Jonathan and North will be centres, I reckon.
Yeah.
And Josh Adams and Zammit and Williams, so that's a fantastic balance, right? So that alone will win us the game, and there's no doubt our forwards will get the ball going forward. So I think we must show respect to Italy, right? We're playing away, right? And they're going to take an attitude now and say, right, okay, we've got nothing to lose. This team hasn't lost a game yet. This is going to be a big win for us. They're going to take that attitude, If we beat Wales, right, then we'll show the world that we have that potential. So that's how they're going to come into the game. And I think Wales is not going to allow them, that win. I hope so. Anyway.
No, I agree. And what you said just now about Paris, in his best, he was the best number 8 on the planet. He would have been he would have got in the All Blacks team. It's very rare you get one player that can drive a whole side, and it happens in football when you've only got 11. But a 15-man side like Italy, who, they've been the whipping boys since they've started in the Six Nations. They've improved. But in the last probably 2 to 3 years, the end of Paris Day, they lost Dominguez, the fly half, who was their other talisman, who was kicking all their points. I just think that they've gone downhill in the last 2 or 3 years, and there shouldn't really be any worries ahead of the Italian game. It's just that little thing in the back of your mind: what if? All of our, I think you mentioned just now, Jamie, the strength in depth that we've got. We've got probably 8 or 9. We haven't mentioned both of them. Who comes in the flank. There's Lewis Hughes, who's not even in the squad. There's that many flankers and second rows that we've got, because we don't mention the forwards, because we're all, all backs. It's very rare I get a forward on. We normally talk about the backs, but the forwards, Gwyn Jones, 2 man of the matches in the last 3 games. Francis, scrummaging, has been fantastic, and I think that's why they're looking to try and rest him before the French game. There's that many players to be brought in for the fringe games, which really is Italy. And we're looking ahead to the French game, thinking thinking ahead of the Italy game. Moving on to the French game, obviously next week. What's your opinion, and how would you deal with it if you had to quarantine? Obviously, this is something that's never happened before. But if you weren't allowed to train, you weren't allowed to leave your hotel room for 10 days, a week and a half before one of the biggest games of your career, what would your mindset be? Because you can't train, you're not with your squad. So you mentioned earlier on about game plans and things like that. That's out the window with the French. They're going to come together with 5, 6, 7 days to go before maybe 9, 10 days before the Welsh game. They can get together, whereas Wales will have played an Italy game. As you all know, as sportsmen, it doesn't matter how much you practice. There's nothing like playing in a game. You don't take the hits, so you're losing your match fitness. How would you prepare for that, John? Or how do you think the French will get on preparing for that?
Well, that's nothing new for the French. The French have gone into every game, and then there's probably no game plan. They're just
yeah.
They're either fantastic or they're absolutely useless. And I think, you're absolutely right, Steve. The fact that it's as I said earlier about Farrell and Itoje and Vanapula, they've not had that game time, and it shows, right? And I think that, the French will suffer from that. What will do us a big favour, I hope, is that England will beat them. If England knock them off their pedestal, because, on form, on paper, the best team in the Six Nations this year is France, right? And they are the team to beat, in my opinion. And if England do us a favour and knock them off that pedestal, the French, in terms of their temperament, their culture, they'll be like a headless chicken then. They won't know where the hell they're going, and that'll be our opportunity then to hopefully kick them when they're down, That's what I'm hoping for.
I think 2 points really. One is they're playing at home. If they were playing away, big advantage to win.
No such thing as a home game anymore. Wherever you're playing now, we won't have those cockerels running on the field and giving them an extra little boost anymore.
But they're notoriously bad travellers. I think one plus side for them with having no crowd, if they do go behind at home, the crowd tend to turn against them. It's like in the French culture, if they're behind, even by 7 points, the booing starts happening. So they've probably got their recordings, and I'd be surprised if they've got booing recordings there. That would be pretty funny. What are your thoughts, Jamie, on that?
Oh, the isolation thing.
Yeah.
They like you said about match fitness. If they ain't going to be match fit, so I would, as a Welsh team, would just play your game, and they're going to come out hard. The French will come out hard, and I think if we stick to our game plan and hope the fitness of the boys, because we're playing week in, week out, training together, that our fitness will take us through. Patience. We just got to have patience. There'll be no rush, and hope that the old fatigue sets in, and we could just take the game to them. As far as what they're doing, whether they'll be doing their own individual training or just to keep their general fitness up. But like you said, there's nothing better than having that bond and having that game time. So the game fitness, I think, would be advantage to us. But again, French, you never know, they'll run from their own try line if they get a chance. But no, I'm looking forward to that game. I think that's going to be one big one. But I totally forgot about the isolation thing that they had. So I'm hoping that'll come in our favour. And by about 60 minutes, they'll blow up. But I do rate the scrum half, Dupont. He's something else. He's at the moment, he's one of the best scrum halves in the world. So unpredictable. Talking about the first 10 yards, Shane Williams, he can get around that scrum. If we can make sure he doesn't play, I think, because he's like the little commander, and he commands everything. He's or puppet master, I should say. He's controlling everything from the scrum, and the fact that one one guy can control something from the scrum and be that good is, I think he's amazing, and he's going to be. I think he'll cause us problems.
He's definitely crucial to the team. But yeah, going back to their isolation, it's the headlines are that they forbidden from leaving their hotel for however many days it is, probably 10 days. Your fitness levels will, 10 days, it doesn't sound a lot, but they will drop a little bit. But for the forwards, if they're not being able to do their weight training sessions, with missing weight training sessions for 2 weeks, you can lose 15-20% of your weight strength that you can, that you can generate. That's a big plus for the Welsh pack. When you see some of the size of those French guys, 18, 19, 20 stone locks, they're huge blokes. And for those guys not to train for 7 to 10 days, a week to 10 days before they're playing against Wales, that's going to be a huge advantage. I think that needs to. They need some kind of. You mentioned the fitness, I think, and patience. I think patience will be a big thing, because I know a couple of years ago we were losing 20. They put 20 points on us in the first 25 minutes, and we came back and beat them. I think that was again the crowd started going against them when we started catching them up, which is always a plus. I think it's going to be, that might be the telling factor. They've got a great skill set. They've always had a great skill set, as John said just now. They're either brilliant or they're absolutely terrible. There's nothing in between. The French flair, even back with Jean-Pierre Rives, his blowing locks at number 7, even back as far as that day, they've always had that flair. And Serge Blanco and Dupont now, he looks fantastic. And you nullify him, you nullify their backs, and we've got the flankers to do that. So hopefully, we'll be okay there. Somebody's mic is running slightly below in front of mine. I'm not sure who it is. What are your thoughts then, Matt, on the French game?
Yeah, like everyone said, it's that age-old adage, which French side's going to show up today. I think Jeremy Guscott probably says it once every BBC broadcast where France are playing. Yeah, I think I think it was the episode we did with the Scottish fella, Derek, was it? We were saying It's always weird in the media how you'll come up to a Six Nations or a World Cup, any rugby tournament really. Wales could have won the Grand Slam the year before and got to the World Cup final, and it'll be, England are the favourites this year. I saw a lot of the same this year, but to me, the way the French had been playing, they were definitely earmarked as the favourites. Been playing super well, scoring loads of points, as you guys said. Dupont, just dynamic, everything you want in a scrum half, really. Sort of that playmaker, really quick over the first 10-15 yards. Maybe not necessarily in terms of the playing style, but he sort of reminds me a bit of Morgan Parra when he was in the French side. He's sort of maybe not a level above the rest of the team, because everyone in that France team seems really good to me, but he's got that extra little bit. He's sort of like the general, like you said, he'll drive the team over. Imagine sort of like a heads-up display in his mind. He's like sort of looking at the little angles in the line, trying to spot the little gaps, like Predator with his heat vision, and he just sort of hits a... Yeah, I think with the gap between them playing the isolation period, it's just a case of, again, staying patient, executing your game plan. And you've got to imagine after about 60 minutes, the fatigue is going to set in, little gaps are going to open. That's what, say you bring someone like Adams, rees-zammit off the bench, I think he'd really thrive in an open game. Well, I mean, I'm getting confused with Italy there. He's obviously going to start against France, isn't he? But I think that's when a player like that will be able to kick it in behind the line, sort of run into the space, and then we might punish. It might be tight for the first 60 minutes, and then we might just sort of build up a head of steam towards the end as they're sort of losing a bit of theirs. And if Sheedy can keep the board ticking over again or bigger, I think that's going to be another important point, sort of getting in and around the 22, either converting chances or being smart enough to keep the scoreboard ticking. But yeah,
just
again,
one point on that about
the
just one point on that. You mentioned the 22. Have you heard the stat, John and Jamie, about the first 2 games? How long Wales were in the opponent's 22, and how many tries they scored?
No.
After 2 games, they'd scored. I think they'd scored 6 tries, and they'd only spent 3 minutes and 23 seconds in the opposition 22.
Wow.
Who's that?
So Wales, they'd only spent 3 minutes and 23 seconds in the opponent's 22 for Scotland and Ireland. That's combined in both games, and they scored 6 tries. So that their finishing has been outstanding. Obviously, that includes Zammit's try where he ran in from 60 odd yards, so he was only in the 22 for like 2 seconds. But to score that many tries in 3 minutes. But on the worrying side, again, I haven't seen the stats since with the England game, how long we were in their 22. And obviously that's going to improve now. We'll spend a lot more time in the 22 when we play against Italy. But when you're playing against France, you've got to be spending a lot of time in the opposition half, because if France are in our half, they're going to score tries. So I think what they will need to work on is territory, is spending more time in, because if you consider if our outside half has kicked the ball into touch in their 22, that's going to be 30-40 seconds in the 22. So for us to only spend 3 minutes in the 22 against Ireland and Scotland, we've either had one line out there or none. So I think territory is going to be a big thing. So Bigger or Sheedy, whoever's going to be playing, will definitely need to be looking at their kicking game more, as opposed to box kicking it back to because their backs are flare back. Now I was worried about the England game, kicking the ball to Johnny May all the time, but they did it. They kept doing it, and we spoke about this in previous radio shows, John, about the box kicking. What are your thoughts on keep kicking it back to the opposition when you got the ball?
Yeah, there was an incident with Wales, England, and the referee had given a penalty to England in a kickable position. And then Ford kicks the ball to the corner into the touch, when they clearly have advantage and they could have scored. So sometimes, and the thing these days, when I compare it to when I played rugby, when they go up for the ball in the air now, you can see everybody around them back off, they don't touch them, So you've got a free sort of, so it's a little bit too much. It's a little bit too much. But again, you see, the key, one thing we haven't spoke about France in terms of how they've improved is their defense, right? You look at what Edwards has given to France, right? So even with the backs that we've got, it's going to be a hell of a job to penetrate their defense. Now he's there, and he's shown that. You can see the huge difference in France. You can't pick those holes with them anymore, because that's where teams always used to have an advantage. When you break their defense, because they either turn up or they don't, and then they go to pieces. At the moment, that doesn't happen. And then, you talk about Dupont. Yeah, you must remember, he's still a young guy, And the thing is, we saw it against Ireland. They rattled him. He didn't have that greater game against Ireland. He wasn't controlling things as one would expect him to, because he's still a young lad, And I think if our back row give him a bit of a hard time, make him go backwards, who knows, isn't it? But I think Edwards has been a key person for France in terms of their defence. And I think that's going to be a big challenge for us. I still maintain, next weekend is going to be the big weekend. If England come out on against France and beat them, then France are under huge pressure, because, with this hullabaloo of the COVID-19 and then losing to England, they'll be the France that we know, they'll be all over the place. Let's hope so anyway.
What are your thoughts, Jamie, on the keep kicking the ball away? In crucial positions at crucial times, they kick. They're in their own 22. They're only kicking it 20-25 yards, and then letting the sprinters come, run it back at us. We've spoken about it in previous weeks when we've had the rugby on, and I think we had Roy Burgess on about a month ago, and he was saying the same thing. Back in the day, you get the ball, I think his words were that New Zealand at the time was keep hold of the pill. You don't let go of the pill. And we seem to be anywhere on the pitch that's in our half. They've got the extra person now at the back of the number 8 to protect the ball, and then they're box kicking it to the flyers. You know, what's your opinion on overuse of that?
As when I played, and obviously over the years, I've never seen so much box kicking. Like you said, it seems to be it used to be to get out of trouble, you kick it down the field and give yourself some distance. But it's going 10, 15 yards, and it's a box kick, always a box kick. I've never seen so much box kicking. Whether it's like you said, mentality of the speedsters on our team or the teams to have a 50-50 chance of getting the ball. But then you could argue the fact, like John said, is that once that ball goes up in the air, nobody's competing for it anymore.
Exactly.
So I don't see the purpose of it. So they're kicking up in the air. Say we're kicking to England. Johnny May's going up. He's catching it. We're not competing. So Johnny May's got a free run or free catch. They've got the pill, as you said. You know what I mean? So why don't we change the game plan and keep hold of that ball? Because if we've got the ball, they can't score.
You know, I go back to the 60s and 70s, right? The great Clive Rowland scrum half, right? And he was an expert on the box kick, right? And in those days, you know, the big hard ball, it worked. Now, you know, we've moved on since then. And, you know, I'll never forget, I was a student at Trinity College in Command. And one of my lecturers was the great John Gwyn Jones, right? And he took me down to Llanelli to train against the Llanelli team. I'll never forget, you know, once we did the training, it was like contact 10 minutes, and there we were against the Llanelli team, you know, David Flanker, Derek Quinnell, all the hard men there, you know. And he gave me the ball, I was scrum half, and he said, right, penalty here, back 10 yards to Llanelli, and he had a cigarette in his mouth, and he said, right, John, what are you going to do here? And I looked up and I see Tommy David, Derek Quinnell saying, come on, boy, come to daddy, sort of thing, you know. And you think, oh my God. So I said to Covington, I said, oh, do you know what I do now? I'm going to put an up and under. Right, I've got a penalty. I'm going to put an up and under. And he said, why do you do that? And I said, well, they're going to have to turn around and go back. And we're going forward. And he took the ball off me. Right? And this is going back now to the mid-70s, right? And he said, you see this ball, John? It's not meant to be kicked away, he said, because you're giving them the ball, right? And look what a great coach he turned out to be, you know, the last time the Lions won in New Zealand, John Gwyn Jones, right? And he had that philosophy back then. It's not meant to be kicked away. Because as Stephen said, you give May a free run and, it's trouble, you know? And I think that's what's happening.
That's my worry with the French game. You know, yes, they've got a big pack and this, that, and the other, but that's the worry. If you keep giving the ball back to their backs, they've got a good set of backs. If their good set of backs have turned up that day, they run riot even when your backs are 10 yards in front of you. If they've got 30 yards to run at you and they've got 4 or 5 men outside, then you know the potential is there to run riot. You know, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. But as I said, we've had Roy on, we've got you two guys on today, and everybody's in the same opinion that the box kicking, as Jamie said, you know, and you've got an outside half outside you. So why are you taking this? Especially with it last week, got one charge now. You know, he's like Inspector Gadget. There could have been 5 or 6 times he could have charged it down, and he's a brilliant, you know, exponent of that. And we're taking a risk for kicking the ball pretty much straight up in the air, it's going 15 yards. You've got an outside half outside you who could be back 5 yards further than normal, and he could be spiral kicking it 60 yards down the pitch over the top of me. And that seems to have gone from the game, and I can't understand what the mentality is. I'm hoping next week, because next week we've got Roy Burgess is back on. We've got Justin Thomas, who played for Wales at full back and on the wing. And we've got Steph Thomas, who's the manager of Carmarthen Quins. And I'm waiting to hear back from Ken Owens, because he messaged me yesterday. He's got to speak to the communications manager of Wales before he's allowed to come on a Zoom call. But if you can get him on, that would be probably the question that I want to ask him, is because obviously he's in the camp, he's in the know at the moment. You know, what is the thinking? If there's something feasible behind it, then fine. But I just can't think why you keep kicking. You know, I suppose as a forward, you'd be so disheartened. You know, you've won a line out, you're in a maul, it's come back, you come out of the ruck and you look up and you've got Johnny May running at you because you kicked the ball away. And you've worked so hard to get that ball back over a period of 40, 50, 60 minutes. It must be disheartening. And I don't, and nobody's answered the question. You're all as flummoxed as I am about it. You know, I just, it's a crazy, it's a weird one. It just seems a tactic that's more and more in the game, but nobody can give me an answer to what it's there for.
It seems aimless almost to a point.
The only time the kick comes, you know, is effective these days. You know, take for example now, if the opponents have got a great defence and you've gone through 10, 12 phases and you're not penetrating, you're not passing the gain line, then that is an option, and not necessarily the box kick. And then another good tactic is, you know, you're in your own half or you're in your 22. Kick it as far as you can, you know, get them to go back. Now that kind of tactic these days is working, but as you said, the box kick, where as Jamie said, you know, you can't compete. You might as well bloody throw the ball. But the other tactic of, okay, let them go backwards and then let them run out to their own 22. That's not a bad tactic. That I see that working quite well, you know.
Yeah,
and you know, you remember that you talked about that game where we beat France. You remember that full back, you know, someone kicked forward and he went back and he tripped over and then North picked it up and scored a try. Remember that one?
Well, yeah,
so that was a great kick.
Okay, predictions then. First of all, for the Italy game, I predict that you're all going to say that Wales are going to win, but roughly what score?
Oh, I reckon. I reckon we'll have 30 odd points on them, but I reckon they'll score. They'll definitely have one try. So I reckon 34.
30 points to 4. John?
I'm saying 32-12. 32-12.
Mart?
I don't know if you've just seen me doing my 7 times table on my fingers just then.
You know that they can't have penalties in between.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll wake up eventually, I promise. Let's go 28. Let's go 34-7. Solid. Oh, how about you, Steve? Sorry, mate.
Even he go to Johnstown School, and he doesn't know his bloody 2 times tables on.
Oh, sorry, I'm from Rill. They usually make us scribble it on the back of a wall. So.
And you know the 7 times table is 35, not 34.
Oh yeah, no, I was going for 4 tries and 2 penalties.
Right, okay.
Not as quick as I love.
I think there's 2 points really. The first point is they're going to be, any fringe players are going to be trying to impress. So I don't think they're going to be sitting back. They will be going for it, not thinking ahead to the France game. I think they're going to try and put on as many points as they can. And if Italy have conceded, 40 plus points against all the other teams, I can't see us putting 25, 30 past them. I think it's going to be at least 40. And if Sheedy is playing, he's going to be pushing for a start against France. I know Bigger will probably get the nod, but I would have thought Sheedy's going to be really pushing. He's going to be trying the X factor passes, which have worked. They've worked in a couple of the games. He had a couple of flat passes when he came on in the first game that we got a try from. So I think he's going to be really trying to turn it on. I think it'll be 4. I agree with you, Jamie. I do think that they'll score a try because our defence has been, very good, but not as good as when Edwards was there. So we have conceded, in each game. So I think we probably will concede, but I definitely think we'll be racking up the points and getting the bonus point. Coming on to the French game, then obviously it's a week ahead, and we're not sure who's going to be playing. So what would be up? It's France in France with no crowd, and we're playing for the Grand Slam. Go on then, Jamie. What was your?
Again, it's the same as England. My heart's telling me the old. We are going to win it. We're going to get it. I reckon it's be close. I reckon we'll be. It's going to be 17. French are going to be way behind. They're going to be behind us. I'm hoping they're going to score any, but it's not going to happen. 17-12 I go for. I reckon it's going to be more of a upfront battle.
Okay, John.
Like John said, they've got Edwards as the defence coach. I reckon it's going to be phase after phase after phase, and we're going to have to see if we can just break them down at the end. And fingers crossed, we will.
I reckon against France, it's going to be a 3-pointer game. I think it's going to be something like 18-15 or 21-18. I think there's only going to be 3 points in it. That last 3 minutes, it's going to be one score, And, you talked about Bigger and Sheedy there, right? I wonder if the Welsh team have got the courage as the selectors and the coaches. You recall when Sheedy was coming on off the bench and what a great impact he had because, he'd lost his place, right? And I remember against the last time we played England 2 years ago, he comes off the bench and he has a stormer, right?
Bigger. You want about Bigger?
Yeah, I'm on about Bigger.
All right, okay, yeah.
It wasn't the number one choice, I reckon it wouldn't be a bad thing to say, right, put Sheedy in and then bring Bigger on, as the impact fly half who's desperate to show that he's the number one. I wonder if they got the courage to do that,
Because I think they did that with Stephen Jones, didn't they? Bigger was stepped up for Stephen Jones. And they did exactly the same with Stephen Jones. They brought Bigger on, didn't they? And like you said, he had a cracking game. And that was the next step, wasn't it? He was in.
Yes.
Yeah. Mart?
3 points. Win by 3 points against France, I reckon.
Okay. Mart?
Yeah. Pretty much I say it's going to be a very nervy
7,
game.
14, 21 or 28.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to go for 6 apiece. I think it's going to be very tight until the last few minutes, and then it's going to explode into carnage for the last 5 minutes, maybe. I think it's going to be 6-all going into the last few minutes. John Gwyn Jones pick the ball out the ruck quickly into the corner. Don't even bother kicking the conversion because it's too far out. And we've got a right footer, so we can't get the angle. Win. What would that be? 11-6. I'd take something like that.
Have you seen the game?
Sorry?
Have you watched it already?
Oh no! I've moved rooms for this episode because we're having a bit of work done on the conservatory. But we've got a crystal ball in the corner, so I can just see Sean Edwards' stink face. Like, come on, are you seriously letting him run rings around you into the corner, really? But no, I think the confidence coming out of the Italy game can really drive us on. There's the match fitness issues and not being at the isolation period for the French. I think it's all starting to point a bit more in our favour. It's just the case of, can we get through Italy unscathed, not lose 3 or 4 big name players to injury or something daft like that? Because that'd probably be the kick in the teeth that'd do it for us if someone like Sheedy went off. But yeah, more confident as the tournament's gone on. Cause I really was not looking forward to this after the Autumn Nations Cup. Considering a bit of a drubbing by England, so I don't think we even got going against Ireland in the first game there. And then, 4 months later, we're edging past them. So steady improvements. We've just got to keep getting this down. I think a bit of the confidence is coming back into the players. Maybe when Pivac took over, there were a few of the fringe players or the ones who were a bit unsure if they were going to lose their place. Your confidence is going to dip a bit. I don't necessarily how much that affects your game as a professional sportsman because I'm not one, but I imagine you know, if I'm rocking up to a rugby game on a Sunday morning and I've had like shit week of training and feeling a bit groggy and that, you're not confident in your own ability, you sort of hesitant, and yeah, I think we can win it. And I'm going to go for 11-6 to the Welsh. We're going to serve up a Scotland special.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll win, and the factors of France not playing for 10 days, training for 10 days, Wales playing. If England beat them, France will be a different team coming into that last game. They'll have nothing to play for. Obviously, they're going to have to play Scotland after us anyway at some point in 3-4 weeks' time. So they know that they've still got half the tournament to go. We'll have got one game, you know. England have got a point to prove against them this week. You know, like John said, if England put 50, 20, do you know where the game is? Are they playing at Twickenham or are they playing in France?
Twickenham.
Right, so they're playing in Twickenham. You know, we've beaten England in the game last week. They got a point to prove. You know, they lost against Scotland in Twickenham, so they really got to. You know, they're playing for a bit of pride, the English now, and they're going to be at their best, I think, and I think they will beat France. They showed it in small spurts against us, and I think they'll beat France. So with that in mind, and all the other factors that are going against France and for us, I think we'll win. I don't think it'll be comfortable, but I think it might be by 10 points. I think it'll be try conversion and a penalty by the end of the 80 minutes. Hopefully, and it showed in the last couple of years that we've been very disciplined, whereas the French are a little bit like the English. You know, they've got a tendency to get at least one yellow card in the game, which, looking at what we've done in the last few games when teams have been a man down and our clinical finishing, we might be able to capitalise. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll do well. But that's great. It's great to talk to you. You've been listening to Randolph Martin Sports Talk on Sportanarium, Friday nights at 5 o'clock. As I said, next week we've got ex-British Lion and Welsh rugby player Roy Burgess on, Welsh fullback Justin Thomas, Carmarthen's Quins coach Steph Thomas, and hopefully we'll get an appearance from Ken Owens, who will be playing on Saturday against France. That's if the communications team will let him play. So we'll see you all next Friday. Thanks very much. Okay, so that's the end of the rugby section. Now we'll move on to football. I've hunted high and low in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I'm trying to find an English rugby fan is just as hard as finding a Liverpool football fan, but we've managed to track one down. It was like trying to find Where's Wally or Lord Lucan. But we got Sam on the other end. He's a Welshman in Spain, supporting Liverpool and teaching English to the Spaniards. Bit of a mouthful, but welcome, Sam. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm great. Thank you very much for having me on.
No problem. There's a hint of a Scouse accent, but you're from North Wales.
Yes, near the border from Rhyl in Denbighshire. So it's that Squelch sort of weird hybrid that nobody wants to admit to having, probably.
Well, it's kind of a cross between. There's a bit of Michael Owen in there, because obviously he was from North Wales, and obviously when he went across the border to Liverpool, scoring 60, 70 goals a season as a 12, 13, 14, obviously he picked up the Scouse accent before he moved, to the bigger club in the area, Man United. But we'll come on to that later. Yes. So you're out in Spain? How long have you been out there?
I've been out here for about a year now. My girlfriend is from here, so I came over here to live here and everything like that. Been teaching English here because it's like the only job you can really do in Spain if you don't speak Spanish. There's not a lot of jobs going as it is, So I've been here for like a year, just doing what I can to get by, sort of thing, But it's a lovely place.
So you don't speak Spanish. You wouldn't be good at coaching the Liverpool side at the moment, then.
It's coming on. The Spanish is coming on, bit by bit. But
it's getting there.
Oh, it's bloody difficult, mind. It's bloody hard.
It would be for a North Walian. Can they? So can they understand you then? Or is it English people that you teach out there, like in an English school?
No, it's like an academy. It's weird in Spain. They take languages so much more seriously than we take it in the UK, you know? So they'll do English in school. And then when they finish school, they'll go to where I work, which is like an academy, but it's like an after school sort of thing, you know? And and I'll be teaching people from the ages of like 12 until like in their 40s and 50s and stuff, who are learning just because their parents want them to, or maybe their job requires them or something like that, and preparing them to do official exams and stuff like this. It's a really good job. It's nice, it's rewarding, but you don't realize how much, how little we understand our own language until you got to teach it to some people, like questions. Oh, it's hard, man. It's hard. I thought it'd be a cakewalk, and then I started doing the job, and after about 2 weeks in, I was like, right, well, I'm really gonna have to sit down and study my own language myself here, because they'll show you up. They'll find you out in 10 seconds.
Crazy. At the end of the day, it's the universal language that everybody's trying to learn it.
Sure.
Right, moving on hastily to Liverpool. I don't know where to start. Champions of England, champions of Europe, champions of the world. Every team gets injuries, and I've seen the statistics on. They've had 112. Was it 1,200 minutes of injuries? That they can't get back, compared to nearly half of some of the other teams. What are your thoughts so far on the last 3 months?
I mean, it's been a difficult watch, to be honest with you. Because being a Liverpool fan for all my life, I've been used to a bit of heartbreak and things not going well, and then the past 3-4 years, it's been almost like sailing for us. It's been all right. But yeah, it's been a crazy year for everybody. But I think the obvious thing is that we've managed it a lot worse than some of the other big teams. Through injuries, of course. But injuries can only explain so much of the problem. Of course, there's other things sort of behind that. But it's been such a huge drop off. It's like nothing I've ever seen. The only thing I can think of that can come close to it is Chelsea, when Mourinho in his second season in his second tenure, when they sacked him halfway through the season because they were in the bottom of the table after winning the league before. It's the only thing I can think that comes close. Yeah,
it's you can go into like squad depth and stuff like that. But when you look at the your last 4 to 5 games, obviously the Chelsea, Everton, at the moment, obviously they're above Liverpool, so are Chelsea. So those are games where they're going to be tough games. But when you're playing against lower teams that you should be beating with your second team, it's when you're right at the top. Yes, you've lost one of the best defenders in the world. I'm a Man United fan, but Van Dijk, he'd walk into any team on the planet. So when you lose your best defender, it's going to make a difference to the whole team. He's the leader. You lead from the back. You lead from the back, and he's the eyes and ears of the team. When he's there, you can see the game from the back. If you've got a captain in midfield or up front, it's totally different. When you lose your leader from, like, I suppose, Maguire at the moment, he's the leader. I saw it on the weekend against Man City, and luckily for us, but unluckily for the players, there's no crowd, so you could hear everything he was saying. He's the leader there. You can see exactly. You got the whole picture. If you've lost your leader, yes, you're gonna lose some games that you probably would have drawn and won, but you were that far ahead last year. Yes, you've lost more players, but for me, it shows 2 things. One, the lack of depth in the squad, but 2, the amount of depth that Man City have got compared to anybody else. You've go on.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. But I think the biggest problem we've had is it's like what you say. It's a mentality problem. We've before, people call us mentality giants before this year. Where
I've heard that this week.
Yeah. So many games and setbacks and everything like this. I think Liverpool fans will have the perception that what we've done on, you know, relatively a shoestring budget compared to the Man Cities or the Man Uniteds and people like this, because although we spent big money, we've sold our best players to do that. It's not been like, you know, constant outgoings. We sold Coutinho for 100 God knows how much million to Barcelona, and that finance for us, Van Dijk and Alisson, who pretty much were the difference in us winning the league or not. You know, without them, without Van Dijk, we came third or fourth, I think. And with him, we go and come second, win Europe, win the Champions League, and then win the Premier League. And the same with Alisson as well. I think if we had Alisson in the squad a few years before he was, then we would, you know, have even more trophies in the cabinet. But the biggest problem we've got at the moment, it's not, I would argue that it's not even the defence, you know. The games we're losing, 1-0s, you know, 1-0s, 2-0s with a penalty in the last few minutes and stuff. The biggest problem we've got at the moment is in attack. We're not scoring goals like we used to. In the old days before we had such a strong defence and stuff, our strategy would be to outscore people. And we were winning games like 4-3 against Crystal Palace and stuff like this. Whereas now, you know, without that strength in defence, we can't seem to make up for it in attack. So Salah has had an incredible season. It's starting to trail off now, but, you know, he top scorer. I think it's been his best return time-wise this season. But Mane, who scored 7 this year in all competitions, I think that is, which is a really poor return for him. Firmino 6. I mean, Firmino's not an out-and-out goal scorer, never has been, and people have their own part. For me, personally, I don't mind that so much for what else he brings to the team, but other people have their problems with it. But the fact that we've lost Van Dijk, maybe that wouldn't have been such a big problem if the front three hadn't sort of lost its potency in the way it seems to have this season. I mean, even the end of last season, after, you know, when they came back from lockdown, we had 9 games. I think we won 4 or 5 of those we won. So you could see the beginnings of a team winding down somewhat, you know, be that the lack of fans, be that, you know, tiredness or a lack of motivation, you know. Maybe it's a problem in mentality that, you know, we worked so hard to get there. Now we're here. Well, we can take the foot off the pedal or something like this. So it could be many things. But at the moment, our lack of results, I think it comes down to a lack of sharpness in the front three. And because of that as well, you know, a lot of people have been speaking about Van Dijk being out, now Henderson, Joe Gomez. But I mean, for me, I think the biggest loss this year has been Diogo Jota, because before he got injured in I think it was a game against Midtjylland in the Champions League. He'd scored a hat-trick against Atalanta. He'd come on twice and scored in the last few minutes to win his games and everything. He brought us that shot, that injection of unpredictability almost. And he was really putting pressure on Firmino and Mane and these players, which since he's been out, we haven't had, you know. And now he's back. So hopefully he's starting tonight against Leipzig. So hopefully we'll start to see, you know, maybe our defense will, you know, will be leaking 1 or 2 goals like we have been, but we'll be able to make up for it in the potency in attack. Who knows? But for me, yeah, injuries are a big problem. But again, I totally agree with what you said with the mentality side of things. Because you're right. I watched the Man United game, and it was loud on the pitch, and I love that. Yeah. I think that's by far the best part about not having fans in the stadium is hearing the footballers talk to each other. You know, I find it fascinating, the sort of, you know, the chemistry between players, and, you know, the kind of things that people say to motivate each other on such an elite level as they are. So if I can, I'll turn the canned fan noise off because it's horrible, and try and actually just listen to what's going on the pitch. And you're right, in the Man United Man City game, I noted it myself of how vocal the Man United players were and how much you could hear that they wanted it on the pitch. I haven't heard that with Liverpool this season since Christmas, really. I mean, Henderson's out now as well, which means there's not that voice. Van Dijk's been out for a while. But you're right, it seems quiet on the pitch. You know, we went 1-0 down against Fulham just before half-time, and it was silent. You didn't hear any arguments. You didn't see any sort of like... It wasn't a surprise to people, you could say. But, yeah, so it's a multitude of things. There's injuries, a lack of mentality, and the front three just going stale, perhaps, you know?
I've heard that because obviously they've lost 6 in a row at home. I've heard they furloughed the guy that does the cheering at Anfield.
Yeah, well, who knows? I mean, that guy, well, it's not as bad as Gunnosaurus, is it, Mark?
Well, I mean, Mesut Ozil was going to pay his wages, so they obviously didn't want to keep him that desperately.
all the way from Turkey.
That's just stupid. That was like the worst bit of PR they could have. You remember the thick of it? That was like one of the sort of PR stunts they pull on that. They go tits up and blow up in the face, and then they'd have to spend a week like mopping it all up. It's interesting what you said about the front three. Actually, with Liverpool, I said before because you're playing Leipzig tonight, so I was watching a bit of the pre-game, trying to catch some of the stats. The front three out of the 12 Premier League games in 2021, they've not scored in 7 of the 12 games. So you know, Salah's been scoring for fun ever since he joined the Premier League with Liverpool. Same with Mane, really. He's always brilliant for Southampton, especially against Arsenal. For some reason, he just seems to love playing against us. He's been a pretty good goal threat when he's been fit and not suspended for you for the last 2, 3, 4 years, however long he's been there. What he said about Firmino's right as well. He's never been that. You know, I do quite rate his hold-up plays, sort of ability as a false nine to come in, play a bit more sort of in as like a sort of 10 false nine, sort of playing the little passes in to allow the space in behind for your wingers to come in. I'm surprised no one else took a punt on Jota though, considering how well he'd been doing with Wolves. I thought that was a really smart signing. Of course, injuries, he's coming back now, and like you said, he's got that unpredictability. I think Wolves have struggled without his goals since he left, so he's always going to bring that to the table. I think we always usually say most players who, if you're going to find the net for a club in the Premier League, you could go pretty much any other club and find the net if you get in the service. And playing for Liverpool, you've got those players to. I think the whole collapse this season, because like you said, I don't think there's ever been one quite as cataclysmic as this, unfortunately.
Maybe not in such a short time.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's literally I mean, after the restart, you were a bit, I think you were so far ahead, you couldn't really lose the title at that point. And there were a few games where it did sort of look like lack of match fitness, having not played for a while. I think there was the Watford fixture. They went down, of course, so that didn't really have much bearing for them. I think it's a bit of a domino effect with sort of like you've lost the spine of your team in effect that you 2 central defenders, Van Dijk and Gomez, have been injured. So, your midfielders, really solid core spanning the team. Again, they've had to move back, disrupting their position. You've had to bring other players in to do roles they're not necessarily suited to. And with your front three not firing as well, that could easily be to do with the confidence, not having those leaders on the pitch driving you forwards. It's,
do you think
a multitude of factors, I think. Do
you think that we've looked a bit sorry for ourselves having lost Van Dijk? I feel that to a certain extent we've become a little bit like woe is me. And that's not just the players or anything. That's the fan base and stuff as well. Like.
Well, that's the thing. You've got John Henry, FSG. He's owned so many sports teams, and you've said about before you've not really been splashing the cash the last couple of years. You haven't. You've offset whatever you've spent with outgoings. He should understand, having built multiple sporting franchises. Well, not built, he's just invested in them, I think. I don't really know his history with baseball, etc. Having sort of invested in major franchises that have sustained winning teams, you know that you have to keep investing the core of players and the money to create those squads. Sure. So I don't know why he's left you so short at the back. And then, we're desperate for a defender in January. Let's sign 2 lads who couldn't buy a pint in America. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really weird one. Selling Lovren in the summer. I mean, Dejan Lovren for us has always been a bit of a controversial figure within the Liverpool squad because, he always had an error in him. He always has a mistake in him somehow. But getting rid of him was probably the beginning of what was going to happen this season because we went into it without really a third choice centre-back, We lost Van Dijk, which is, it was a bit of a freak accident with, it was a foul on him from Jordan Pickford. Then Gomez later. So we literally didn't have, the fact that there was not another centre-back available is a bit of a shambles, isn't it, of planning, really. Fabinho has been outstanding at the back, if you ask me. I mean, for a one-on-one defender, he up there in the world, I would say, for the way he was playing in the first half of the season. But he's now had his problems with injury himself. I think it's now 18 or 19 different centre-back pairings that we've had. Different, which is, it says it all, doesn't it? But it's getting to the point now when you're starting to hear, you know, the Klopp out shouts, which is unbelievable when you consider what's happened. But that doesn't mean that Klopp should be immune to some sort of judgment for the way the season's gone. I mean, having lost Van Dijk and Gomez, you know, we've lost the core of our midfield because of that, because we brought Jordan Henderson and Fabinho into the middle. So that, of course, is going to have a knock-on effect on the front three also. And it's just this, you know, that 18, 19 different pairings at centre-back, it spells out exactly how impossible it must have been to get any sort of momentum going with this team, because it's changing so frequently, you know. And I think Jurgen Klopp has been naive in continuing to try and play the way that we have done for the past 2 years of, you know, that mix between pressure, you know, and constant pressing, but, you know, long balls and possession in the key moments. It's been naive to try and play that way with lesser players. You know, we've had Nat Phillips, who's like 26, who hadn't had a Premier League start until this year. We've had Rhys Williams, who was playing in the National League North last year. I mean, he's below a team worse than Wrexham, Martin, you know. And yeah, so it's been, we've continued trying to play the same. So I think Klopp has to shoulder some of the blame for not adapting and not changing our tactics, not trying to find a new way to deal with the problems. But at the same time, I think, you know, the level, the number of which to which injuries have been coming in, have made it maybe impossible to plan any other way, you know.
I think I agree with you on the Klopp thing. You know, he's got to be made accountable. Nobody is above the law. Yes, you've had injuries. It's mainly the injuries at the back, because when you put your unsung hero of your title race, which is Henderson. Yes, you know, yes, he won. You know, you got the plaudits at the end of the day, but he's not the Hollywood star of the team. He's not a Salah. He's not a Mane. You know, even Firmino's name, those guys are mentioned when you look on social media. Oh, Firmino's done a no-look pass. You know, Henderson's name isn't mentioned. He's only mentioned with people in the know of football. You know, so for him to be the engine room of your midfield, to be stuck back in defence in centre back, yet Fabinho's played really well, who is another midfielder. So when you lose your nucleus and they're back in defence, it doesn't matter how good they are. Whoever then you put in midfield, the word is confidence. They're not going to have the confidence to to go forward. So I was looking at the team that you played Fulham in the week. You know, you've got Keita was signed for a lot of a hell of a lot of money. It was a bit of a gamble, but from what the write-ups that I was seeing of him before they bought him was, this guy is going to be really good. He was injured before he came, so he didn't play for a while. And then I think he had a couple of stormers when he first joined, and it was like, this guy is going to be good. You've got Wijnaldum was playing in midfield. You've got Milner, and then the guys that you mentioned, Williams and Phillips were playing. But the names in the team, as in Salah, Jota, Shaqiri, they were all playing. Alexander Arnold, he's had a terrible few months. He's
spot on. Yeah.
His stats. Last year he was a shoo-in for England. His assists, him and Robertson's assists were the best in the Premier League. Where this year his giving the ball away has been the worst in the Premier League. So when you've lost your nucleus, you've lost your best defender. Robertson's played okay, but Arnold has played awful. So there's so many players. You mentioned earlier at the beginning about them maybe resting on their laurels. They've won the league for the first time in, since my mates who were Liverpool fans were probably 10. When they went, so they're all over the moon. Jota was an unbelievable signing. They bought him, and I thought, Jesus, they've spent a lot of money on the Wolves striker.
Didn't play him for a few weeks, and then when he came in, it was like, I think he scored 7 goals in 4 or 5 games. Like, but Klopp's a genius. But yeah, it's 100% is down to the injuries. But then when you play Fulham, who are struggling 3rd or 4th from bottom, and you've still got, Jota's played a couple of games. You've got Shaqiri, who for me is underplayed in Liverpool. When he plays for his international team, and he was Southampton, wasn't he?
No, Stoke.
Sorry, Stoke. He was very good for them. Salah, Will Anderson, who's been touted as a Real Madrid, Barcelona signing. Milner has been very good. You've got your keeper back. So 7 or 8 players there who pretty much were playing a lot of last season. And then on the bench, Mane came on, Fabinho, and Alexander-Arnold. So there's 8 or 9 players in total who played in that game against Fulham. You should be winning that game, especially at home. Not at a canter, but you should be winning it 2 or 3-1. And there's a lot of games you've been playing where last year you were winning in the last 5-10 minutes, like you mentioned. Whereas this season, I'm looking at the commentary, while watching United playing, and it's like, Liverpool are losing 1-0, they'll probably win 2-1, or they'll score a goal and get 1-1. But you see it gets time and time is coming on. You got a minute to go, 2 minutes to go. They're going to score. Last season, every game, if you were losing or drawing, you were winning in the last 10 minutes. And it was normally Mane, like you pointed out. Mane was, I don't know how many he scored last year to this year, but the ratio's got to be 3-1 compared to this season.
This season he scored 7. Last year he was equal top scorer, wasn't he?
So there you go.
So, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Especially with it's a really interesting point that you've noted about Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, because when Salah and Mane can't break in because of a low block, which is something that we're really seeing this year. I mean, all the teams that have come to play, especially at Anfield, these lower teams like Burnley and West Brom and Newcastle, it's all a low block. You've got 10 men behind the ball. We had an answer for that last year, and it was Robertson and Alexander-Arnold. Now, Robertson, I can excuse him because the amount of minutes he's played is unhuman. It's ridiculous. He's played like 3 seasons worth of football without a break. We bought Kostas Tsimikas, a Greek international, to cover for him this season, to give him some well-earned rest. But, in true Liverpool form, he's played like about 10 minutes of football because he's been injured, But Alexander-Arnold is so true. And I feel like, again, he's someone that sort of evaded the glaring light in the interview room a bit, He came back from summer not quite right, not fully fit, and he injured himself. He had a couple of weeks out. And we were seeing Nico Williams come in for him, and he did a decent job. I mean, he's made a lot of errors and stuff, but he's a 19-year-old kid trying to replace probably what could be the best right back in the world. However, he came back. He hasn't been right since, and you're right. He's broken records this season for the amount of times he's given the ball away. We're seeing useless, hopeless crosses. Completely just. Whereas last year, every single ball he pinged through, it would find its way to someone. This year, then he won't be beating the first man and stuff like this. So, our plan B, which has always been our fullbacks, isn't working. Now, I don't know if that is because, like you say, Robertson's just run into the ground, and Alexander-Arnold has just, I don't know, he just seems to have maybe it's confidence thing or something like this. But it could also be the fact that we've been found out a little bit in regard to our fullbacks, So now, it's easy enough to block Salah and Mane if you don't play a high line and they can't get the balls in over the top to the back from someone like Van Dijk, who we obviously don't have. That's easy enough to block. But if you did that, then you'd have to take the risk with Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. But these two players, now they've lost the fear factor. Nobody's afraid of an Alexander-Arnold cross at the moment. They invite them in, and we're paying for it. And again, that might come down to a lack of reinvention from last year. If we've won the league, nobody remembers second place, do they? But the year before last, we came second with a record tally of points, So that's 2 years of playing the same football and being very successful in it. you know, with a Champions League and a Premier League. But the third, you know, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times, almost, you know. So, you know, maybe I'm hesitant to criticize Klopp because, you know, I worship the guy, but, you know, everybody, you know, criticism is a good thing, you know. So I do think a lack of reinvention this year, especially regarding the fullbacks and, you know, our method of attack for a low block, it's been flawed this year.
I agree, but I can see what you're saying about the, you know, they've played the same style, you know, but Barcelona played the same style for 5, 6, 7 years with Iniesta. You know, football goes through stages, as in, you know, you got Barcelona, Real Madrid. They had small players like the 3 I've just mentioned. 5 years before, you know, you look at the World Cups and the teams that were successful were the guys that were 6'3", they had engines. I was like, you know, how can Barcelona be winning games against players who were, you know, half a foot taller than them?
Yeah.
You know, but they kept doing it for year after year. Messi hasn't changed his game for 10 years and he's scoring 30, 35 goals a season or more. It's obviously it's down to the, you know, the injuries, mainly from the defense. And when you've got you've got, you know, there's no excuse for Arnold. There isn't. And you know, the one stat that I read when it was, I thought that can't be right. And I can't remember exactly what it was. It was either 38 or 48 times he gave the ball away. I thought, well, that can't be right because that's like once every 90 seconds. And I was on with the Liverpool, you know, we had Dan on probably, you know, a couple of months back. And he said, no, you're right. It was 38 or 48 times. And it's like, you know, number one, good on him for getting the ball every 90 seconds. But then to give it away pretty much every time is incredible. So if you've got somebody with no confidence, and then you've got Robertson, who you've said has been run into the ground, which is kind of down to Klopp, because you've got to have a backup. You know, no matter what, every position in the Premier League, you're going to have somebody who's can play that position. So if Liverpool have got a guy who they've brought in, a Greek international who's got injured, well then, if he's injured, Milner can play left back.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a good point.
Milner's played there before, so you give somebody like Robertson a break. You have to do it. And if he's knackered and he can't get up there because, you know, there's not really an excuse for being tired. But if you're playing on a Saturday, then you're playing like he's playing tonight in the Champions League, and then he plays again on the weekend. It doesn't matter how fit you are. You know, you can be the fittest bloke in the world. You can't run because they're not just jogging around the pitch. He's sprinting up and down the touchline. He might have a minute break, but he's running between 9 and 12, 9 and 13 kilometers in the game. He's not jogging, he's running. Yeah. So they're running 9 to 11 kilometers in the game, and then to do it 4 days later with probably, they don't do much training in between, especially because of this COVID, they're playing 3 games a week. So to have that pressure of, he can't supply that ball to Mane and Salah like he was doing last season, because he knows that if he does run up the wing, okay, hold on, in his mind, he's thinking, right, who in my makeshift midfield is going to understand that I'm doing this and is going to cover for me? So probably 20-25% of the time, he's not running up the wing because, number one, he's too knackered to do it. Number two, he hasn't got the confidence because he hasn't got the same midfielders behind him. Because when you've got your nucleus of your 13, 14, which they had last year, a good adage that I always remember was when Paul Merson, Ian Wright told a story about Paul Merson, and I remember Paul Merson. He was a good player, you know. He sprayed the ball around, but he wasn't, you know, world class. I remember Ian Wright saying, you know, we used to play together. We, you know, he was my midfielder. We used to play every week. We used to train every week, and literally, if I made a run, Merson would pass that ball to me without even looking. It was like telepathy. And if you lose your midfield, Robertson's going to run down the wing thinking, and 3 or 4 times out of 10, he's not going to get the ball because whoever's in midfield hasn't got that built-in radar to know that he's going to run. So he's wasting his time. He's wasting his energy. And I think it's obviously it's a combination of lots of things. But you look at Liverpool last season and it was your wing backs up and down, and then everyone else in the strike force. Firmino's up there running, Salah's up there running. Those three guys, there's no point putting a long ball to them. None of them are going to win a long ball. So it's exactly what you've just said at the beginning. The game plan hasn't changed, but when you haven't got your outlets there, it has to change because nothing's going to happen.
Look at Man City this year. Their style of their style of play has changed entirely. You know, they don't press like they did last year or the year before. They don't press at all. They keep the ball. They run the other team ragged. So by the time the other team do get the ball, they're too knackered to do anything with it. Now Liverpool have done the opposite. We've tried to, you know, we're beating a dead horse in the pressing game in a season like this COVID season has forced us to play. You know, it's poor player, poor management in a way that, which is, you know, it's difficult to say, but it is. I mean, we should have found a different way to play by now. But then it comes into it again. It's like with the amount of injuries we've had and everything, and I feel guilty almost like resting on that. But with the amount of injuries, how do you develop? You know, how do you keep an 11 going enough to develop a new style of play? You know, if everyone's coming in, coming out, you know, midfielders into the back, you know, and everything like this, how do you have any kind of consistency enough to develop another style of play? And at the end of the day, we don't have the finances that City have, where, you know, they've got, you know, they spent like, what was it, £1 billion on their back line?
I know that they spent 150 million on 3 full backs last year in, you know, Mendy, or whoever it was, Kyle Walker. I think probably the year before.
Cancelo it was as well. Cancelo.
Well, Cancelo was more recently. I mean, like at the time it was Mendy, Walker, and a third one, and it was they were all like 50 million at the time. You know, going back. But when you look at their, as you said, 100% correct with style of play. They've lost Aguero. They've played against Southampton. Well, obviously they're struggling, but they're still mid-table. They've beaten them 5-2 without a striker. You know, Sterling wasn't playing. Who's, for me, he's not really a striker. Aguero has been injured. He was on the bench, and Jesus wasn't playing. But they scored 5 goals. You know, they've run the team ragged, and they basically, as you said, they've played like Barcelona. You've got, you know, Gundogan, small guy, Foden, England's next world-class player. You know, Bernardo Silva, small. You know, 5'10", probably 12 stone, 12 and a half stone. You know, Riyad Mahrez. That's their front five, and they have no striker, but they're running from everywhere. They're keeping it 5-10 yard passes. You know, Pep's way, as he did. You know, when he was at Barcelona and Bayern Munich. But yes, they've got the money, but they've left some of the money on the bench. You know, Jesus, Brazilian striker, they've left on the bench. Aguero has been back 3 or 4 weeks. He started, you know, he's been on the bench 2 or 3 times. He's come on.
COVID though, isn't he, Aguero?
But he's back. He's been back for 2 or 3 weeks. He was on the bench in the last game, came on. You know, but they haven't. And he came on after 72 minutes against Southampton. So, you know, they're bringing him back nice and slowly, which is fine. But there's nothing wrong with Jesus, who was on the bench. There's nothing wrong with Sterling, who was on the bench. So they played basically with 6 midfielders, and they've scored 5 goals. So I think the difference I think Klopp's been naive. You know, he's very, very good last year. But when you earn your stripes when you're up against it, and this year he's up against it, and he hasn't earned his stripes.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, outside of football as well, it's been a really difficult year for someone like Klopp. But it only happened recently. But, you know, he lost his mum. He couldn't go to a funeral, stuff like that. That's got to affect you somehow. Yeah. But at the same point, I do agree. I agree that Klopp's been naive this year. We were naive to let Lovren go and not have a third choice centre back. We were naive to believe that that we didn't need to update the midfield. I think with, you know, Milner, I've got nothing but good things to say about Milner, but the bloke's like 35 this year. You know, putting him into left back, for me, it won't cut it anymore. I mean, it cut it like 3 years ago when he was doing it, when he was, you know, still at the peak of his game. But as good as he is, as intelligent a footballer he is and everything, he's not, especially in a season like this where the timetables are relentless. You know, you've got a game every 3 or 4 days. Like, like as if you were playing in the championship or something, you know. So yeah, I do think he's been naive. I think he should have adapted the play the way that Pep Guardiola has, and gone for a more sort of pragmatic style, keeping the ball, tire the opponent, attack them when they're huffing and puffing, instead of just trying to get the ball back, you know. So yeah, I mean, this is the problem with, you know, this is the Liverpool problem this year. It's like, well, there's so many of the problems. Which one do you attack first? You know, is it the injuries? Is it the problems and stuff they've had off the pitch? Is it the lack of bodies they've got? The lack of quality on the bench? Is it the style of play? You know, so there's plenty of things that you could say, and I think it, you know, the real answer is it's an accumulation of everything. But really, I think not just Klopp, I think the club as well, you know, that up in the higher up in the hierarchy as well, it's been naive. We haven't invested. Invest when you're on top. That's what everybody knows is the way to go. No, you win the league, buy a star player, keep it fresh, and we haven't, which is it's a shame. But again, I feel like a lot of people have forgotten as well that, you know, we were first at Christmas. We had like a 7-point gap. So, like I said, the drop off has been so huge that you know, I think they are probably themselves. The players are probably in this like freak bubble of like what's happening. They're probably shell shocked themselves, you know, and they, you know, what they really need to do and what tonight could do for them as well. You know, a nice run in Europe could just give them a slap on the face and say, right, all right, it's happened now. It's time to move on, isn't it?
I think one problem is, which we haven't mentioned, is the crowd. You think at home, Liverpool, they've got an extra player, probably, you know, more than most places. You know, a lot of clubs, you know, yeah, you've got your crowd, but Anfield, you know, on a midweek game in the Champions League or on a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, you know, that you know, the Kop, it's like having an extra player, and they, you know, and they, you know, they haven't got that, and it proves it. You know, they've in the history of Liverpool Football Club, you know, I'm smiling because I'm a Man United fan, but they've lost 6 games in a row at home. And you know, a stat that I saw this week, you know, I like the old stat or two, was their next game at home is, I think it's April the 10th, and so on April the 9th, they haven't won a game at home for 115 days, which is just, and you know, it's incredible. I think they where we got they play Aston Villa. You know, 3 o'clock on the 10th, they play Aston Villa, which is the 116th day without a point at Anfield, which has never happened in 100-odd years.
And they battered us 7-2 in the away game as well.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention that. But what I was going to say was Villa. You know, I think Villa are one place behind you, but they've got a couple of games in hand. Obviously, there's a couple of games before that, which, you know, you both have to play. You got Wolves away on the 15th, and then there's a couple of weeks break, which I presume is internationals, and then you've got Arsenal, which comes nicely on to Martin's happy birthday Arsenal cup that he's got. But that's
gone cold.
Yeah, that's a tough game. You know, Arsenal are they're on the up. They've got over the Ozil debacle by getting rid of him. It doesn't matter what club you're at, when you got somebody that's sitting on the bench earning stupid money, who's a world-class player. Something's gone on there in the background, which, you know, Martin can, you know, give us the insight to that in a minute. But I just think that, you know, obviously we're still talking about Liverpool, that the next few weeks are crucial for Klopp. For me, it's more of a case of, you know, you're not going to win the league. There's a high possibility you're not going to be in Europe, because the teams that are above you are, a couple of them have got games in hand. You've only got really Villa behind you, who've got 2 games in hand. But if it goes against you, you're going to be 6 or 7 points below 7th or 8th. So, yeah, and that's looking plausible and likely. So I think for Klopp, he's got to look at it in a way of, you know, we've got Wolves at home, away. We've got Arsenal away. He's now, last season, it was a case of, who are we playing next? How are we going to beat them? Now it's going to be a case of, you know, who are we going to play next? How are we going to get any points off them? And the negativity of that's going to make a difference.
Yeah, 100%. But in fact, our away form's been quite good.
You don't want to play at home.
It's the madness of it, isn't it? Like 6 games at home lost in a row. In all of our history has been unthinkable. And I think the fact is it wouldn't happen if there were fans in the stadium. I think a lot of the results for every single team, though, I don't want to say that it's just a Liverpool thing. For a lot of the results that happened this season would never have happened if there were fans in the stadium. But 6 games at home, it wouldn't happen. And the games at home that we've played have been so poor. It's felt like one continuous game. Just the backdrop of these, these red seats in the background. So we've got we're playing away against Wolves this weekend, like I said, and then we've got the 2-week international break as well.
Yeah.
Let's just the South American players aren't going away for that, so that means Fabinho and Firmino are staying in camp. I'm not sure if there are African games this international break. I'm not sure, so maybe that could mean Salah and Mane. Hopefully, this 2 weeks break can just really give them a chance to recuperate and just locate themselves and just get over it. They need to pick their heads up and move on now, because
just one thing that I just want to interrupt you. There was what you mentioned, the red seats. There was one Liverpool fan that was on a talk show this week, and his excuse for Liverpool's bad form at home, I don't know whether you've heard it, is that because the seats are all red, that the players couldn't see their own players to pass the ball.
You know what? There's a running theme of this. Liverpool a couple of years ago, we had the nets red for the goals, and they requested for them to be replaced, and now they are. You'll notice this next game is they're white, and that was because they argued that they couldn't see the nets, they couldn't see where the goal was properly because the red shirts behind the net were blending in. So we've got a history of this. So
is that literally saying I couldn't find the back of the net?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So there's that, yeah. So we've got history on that. There's form on it,
So Liverpool, Arsenal. Then obviously you've got Wolves coming up, and then you've got to say a couple of weeks break, and then you've got Arsenal away. Wouldn't have been a tough game last year. Wouldn't have been a tough game probably up until January, but they seem to have found their form. What's happened, Matt? What do you think it is?
I don't know about if we found any sort of form yet at the minute, to be honest, mate. We did well against Leicester, but they were struggling quite a lot with injuries, and they did get one up, in fairness. I think we just did quite well to turn that one around. I think every time me and Sam have watched a Liverpool-Arsenal game together, it's usually a draw, isn't it, mate? So that's...
Thank God.
Oh yeah, that saves a few arguments, I guess, on the way out of the pub. But
make sure we go watch it in a public place. There's no handbags.
Well, no handbags and witnesses. So. But yeah, I don't know. The Burnley result was a bit of a weird one. I don't know if you guys saw any of the highlights. I didn't watch the actual game. I didn't finish work in time because it was the early kickoff. The own goal. Well, it wasn't an own goal. Xhaka, because we played that really stupid playing out from the back.
At Chris Wood, didn't he? It smacked off his chest. It was a freak.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
It had to be Xhaka, didn't it? It had to be.
I still, to this day, don't know why we persist with keeping Granit Xhaka in the team. He's absolutely woeful. I don't know why we haven't shipped him off back to continental Europe. Yeah.
He's a liability, isn't he?
He really is. I thought he came in as a sort of tough tackling, ball winning general in the middle, sort of like a Vieira-esque type player, but he's got no engine whatsoever. He's supposed to have a decent range of passing, but he finds the stands more often than he finds the red and white shirts. And
so he's got a good range of passing then.
Oh yeah.
He's shakeable as well, isn't he? He lets things get to him so easily. Yeah. Do you remember him clapping the fans and stuff when they were booing him?
And then throwing his shirt, the typical player coming off to the bench. He was just a water bottle kicking short of a touchline ban, probably. No wonder. I still don't know why he was appointed captaincy. I don't know if they see him as a leader in the dressing room. I can't remember what pundit it was, but they were defending David Luiz for God knows what reason. Maybe he'd put a hit squad on the guy's family.
When he came, I thought he was like a Pepe character. I thought, he he did spray the ball around when he first came and when he was at his previous club. Decent player, but hot-headed like Pepe, and just easily sent off. And what Sam just said, you can what am I thinking of? You can get some people sent off pretty easily by getting into that. I was thinking of a couple of rugby players. You can get them sent off by just playing them up a little bit in the year, as you said, bit in the year, and he seems to be off 2 or 3 times a season. There's tough tackling, and then there's stupidity, and he's more in that range.
He had a crack in Euros, didn't he? In 2016, he had a crack in Euros for Switzerland.
Yeah.
So I feel like Arsenal just fell for one of these where someone has a great international tournament, comes to play for your club, and you realise, oh, no, we've bought a dud here. What comes to mind for me for Liverpool is El Hadj Diouf. Do you remember that?
And Shaqiri. Shaqiri's place, but Shaqiri's probably not so much, but he had a crack in Euros, comes to Liverpool. I thought, this guy is very, very good, but then you don't play him enough.
Yeah, it was a weird one with Shaqiri. The year we bought him, he really fought hard to get into the team, and he did. It was the year we came second, and he did excellent as well. He was really, really good. He scored from free kicks. Where, in that moment, we didn't have any specialist free kick takers or anything like this. And then he's had like a year and a half on the sidelines. He's come back in this season because of necessity through injury and stuff like this. But he linked up really well with Jota a couple of times. But then, since December, really, whenever he's been in the team, he's looked stale. But I think he'll always have his name in folklore for what he did to United.
Yeah, he's a good player. I rate him. I thought he was, he had a crack in Euros, and then he came and he played well for Liverpool. I think the problem is when you've got plenty of money, then you buy better.
Sure, but I mean, we got him on the cheap. When he came, I thought that is the smartest bit of business I've ever seen. He was like 7 million or something because he had a clause in his contract. If Stoke got relegated, we could get. He had like a release clause, so we got him on the cheap. And maybe with Shaqiri is one of the because he's hot and cold. He was a talisman. I feel like he's a great talisman for a middle of the table club, which means probably right now then he'd be great for Liverpool. but I don't know. Maybe it's a matter of him being in a team of great players. He doesn't stand out as much. Maybe
great to see a Liverpool fan taking the mick out of Liverpool.
It has to be done, If you don't laugh, you'll cry, mate. If you don't,
you're doing my job for me. You're doing my job for me. Brilliant. So you've got those players. You've got everybody out. I have sympathy for you because it's.
Yeah, but I mean, Leicester are everywhere out. They're third,
They are.
The difference with Leicester is that they'll completely change the system. They'll play 1 week with 3 at the back, 1 week with 2. They'll have 2 up front. They'll play in a 4-4-2. They'll adapt to it. We'll keep going the same as always, a 4-3-3 with a false 9 and inverted wingers and right and left back, up and down. You can. No one is surprised by us, but Leicester, they've got. It's good management,
That's Klopp's problem. You can paper over it as much as you haven't, but the Liverpool fans, it's a bit of a running joke at the moment on social media. Keep Klopp in, as a United fan, keep him in because it's quite funny seeing Liverpool dropping down the table. But they're a good side. They've got world class players, but the buck stops with the manager. Solskjaer at United. I think he won 8 or 9 in a row when he started. Then it was Ollie. Ollie's at the wheel. Then get Ollie out because they'd lost a few. It's a thankless task at the end of the day. But when you've pointed it out there, that it doesn't matter who's playing, the formation stays the same. The 3 up front, you haven't got. You've got Jota up there tonight, and Firmino's not playing. You might be on the bench, but it's 3. Then you've got your 3. Then you've got your 4. You've got your 2 wing backs, and it's predictable. And when you haven't got your best players, you're going to have Fulham, and they look and it's like, who's going to be in defence then? You've got Williams, and you've got who's the other guy? Williams and
In the centre back, right? It was Phillips and oh God, who was it at the centre? And Reese Williams. Yeah, Reese Williams. We had two Williamses.
Okay, so you got the two of them instead of Van Dijk and Henderson or Fabinho or Gomez, and they can look at it, and you've got teams now going, right, okay, so where's the leak going to be? Where's the weak link going to be this week? And because you haven't got that strength and depth, somewhere in that team, there's going to be at least two names on that, probably three names on that team sheet where it's like, okay, there, and there. That's the weak links. That's where we're going to aim for. You're not going to aim for, the backs are going to be sitting back 5 yards because they know that you're going to have Salah and Mane running at you. Mane's had a dreadful season, as you said, scoring 7. I think it was 2 or 3 months ago we had Dan on, and he was saying the same thing for 2 or 3 months before that. He's come back after whenever there was an international break on or the COVID restrictions, and Mane has been, a shell of what he was last season. So I think it's a mixture of everything, which has made it, a bad season. And hopefully, even as a United fan, hopefully, Klopp stays, you'll bounce back, because there has been rumours that the German job is coming up, which very, very rarely comes up.
15 years he's been in the job, isn't it, Joachim Low?
Yeah.
When I saw that, without any of the other noise, I just saw the headline, Joachim Low to resign after the Euros. I felt it in my belly, like, oh no. It's the first thing I thought. He's come out since and said no, he's staying and everything like this. But it's a matter of if he's pushed now. I can't see us sacking Klopp. I mean, even for someone who's not a Liverpool fan, like I said, the Premier League is better with Jurgen Klopp in it, I think.
I love him. I think he's a great, as a United fan, I think he's a, there's managers that are boring. There's, Solskjaer's, you can't say he's a bad manager. You can't say he's a good manager because he's only just started. He's been there a year, 18 months. And, they're second in the league, second, third between them and Leicester. And, he's doing a decent job. But he's not a character. You have to have characters in, you don't have to have them all, but you've got to have some. And Klopp, Mourinho, you watch their press conferences and they're funny guys. They put a smile on your face. As I keep going, I'm a Man United fan, but when Klopp comes on, he puts a smile on his face. I think he's a good guy. He tells it as it is. He has a bit of a laugh, and it's good to have in the Premier League, 100%.
Sure. I feel so bad for him as well. I can't imagine the pressure he's under. I feel for the bloke, with his mum dying and everything recently, not being able to go to the funeral and all stuff like this. And on top of that, having the team that playing the way they are, the media pressure and all stuff like that. It must be hell in that dressing room.
It must be hell, look. It must be hell waking up on a Friday morning and looking at your paycheck with a couple of million quid in the bank over the year.
Yeah, well, there's that,
You can't
feel this,
yeah, you can't feel too sorry for them. But I agree with you. There's pressure, but when you're earning that kind of money, you've got to take that pressure. And when there is no plan B, I've seen a couple of games with United this season, and I thought, it's not going right. What are you going to change? And stuff doesn't change. So it's not just Klopp. It's happening in it's a weird season. Everybody's beating everybody apart from Man City.
Yeah, you've no idea what could happen. To be honest, we could now go on a run of win the rest of our games and finish fourth. Who knows? The season's just I know, but we can do. But, yeah. But I mean, it's that kind of season. I can't. It was only like 5 years ago that every single time that the team at the top of the table at Christmas went on to win the league.
Yeah.
We were top of the league at Christmas. We're 8th or something, So it just shows this season. I think there'll be a lot of teams like Everton and Aston Villa who will remember it really, really fondly, and there'll be other teams who want to wipe it from history.
Well, West Ham are up there.
West Ham, yeah, Christ.
If you look at the actual league, it's just ridiculous. As in, at the start of every season, it's 40 points. 40 points is what, apart from United, City, Chelsea, the top 5, everybody goes, right, 40 points, that's your target, get there, and we're in the Premier League next season. At the moment, you've got Burnley are 15th, we're only in we got March, April, May. I think the last game of the season is at the end of May, isn't it? Because it's been elongated so long. 23rd of May, Liverpool play Palace. So we're nearly into June. It's only March, and you've got teams like Palace and Southampton on 33, 34 points. They're 13th and 14th in the league. Generally, it's Arsenal at the moment are 10th, and they're on 38 points. So in theory, you could have teams like Newcastle. They only need to win. They're fourth from bottom, and they only need to win 4 more games, and they're on 40 points.
They're going down for me, Newcastle. For me, they're gone. I think Fulham are going to have them,
There's only a couple of points in it. Newcastle are on 27, Fulham are on 26, but Newcastle have got 1 game in hand. But it's just crazy that I think that if the bottom 2 hadn't played so bad, as in 14 points and 18 points, anyone could hit 40 points by the end of the season. So this season, it's just so weird that there's no, I'm glad I'm not a betting man, because whoever's bet on certain things this season have been out of the window with,
100%.
With prediction. So prediction on Liverpool's place at the end of the season, then? What are you thinking?
I reckon we'll scrape Europa League spot. I reckon we'll get to about 6th. I don't know who that sacrifices at the top. I don't know who goes down. Maybe West Ham. Just if you assume that some kind of normality will come back into play at some point, perhaps West Ham will fall down a little bit. I could, apart from praising Leicester, I could also see them starting to drop down a little bit. It's what happened last year. That they were in 2nd place. They were our main contenders last year until after Christmas, and then they fell down into Europa League spots. So I can see us ending up about 6th. I don't think, I think the season's gone, hasn't it? We're not going to get the title. I think it would be
right there.
Well, I think it would be extremely difficult and probably nigh on impossible now for us to get Champions League. So I think
unless you win the Champions League, which you never know, could happen. I mean, we're 60 minutes into the Leipzig game, it's still 0-0. We've missed about 3 open goals as well. What was the first leg?
2-0. 2 away goals as well, so we should be fine.
You're all right. Yeah, you're all right.
We should be fine. But then, if we come and get like Barcelona or something next, or PSG, and
PSG were 1-0 last time.
Yeah. I think Messi might have scored a screamer since then. But I don't know. But yeah, the Champions League, it could happen. Wouldn't that be mental? If we finish like 6th and win the Champions League, get into Champions League next year, that would be a real tribute to 2021. That would.
I think with the players that you've got, compared to, the previous times you've done well in the Champions League, I don't think you've got much chance this time. You've had miracles, but this would be beyond. This would be beyond a miracle. I think the problem with finishing 6th, for you guys, is the difference with Leicester last year. Compared to this year, Vardy's been out he's had periods out this year. Maddison has been out. So pretty much basically their 2 best players, and they're still, they're right up there. They're 10 points above you. So you'd have to go on a run of pretty much winning nearly every game. They'd have to lose 4. And I don't know what their fixtures are, but I can't see them, doing that. Chelsea are on the up.
Chelsea will get Champions League without a doubt.
They've had their bad patch. Havertz had his injuries. Werner hasn't scored many since he's come in. They're on the up. Ziyech, he's playing very well. West Ham playing out of the skins. They're 5 points above Liverpool with a game in hand. They bought really well in the summer, so they're doing well. And then the other 2 above you, Everton, 3 points ahead with the game in hand. They bought well last summer with, Rodriguez. They've still got, Richarlison's playing well. He's back from injury. And then you've got Spurs, Spurs have had a terrible season. They've lost 9 games, but they're still it shows how bad Liverpool's season has been. They're above Liverpool. And it seems to me now that it's in the last, I think, Bale has scored 5 or 6 in his last 3 or 4 games. He's played really well.
2 braces in a row, he's had, hasn't he?
He has. He scored 6 or 7 in 5 games. He's played really well. Him and Kane and Song have had, more assists than anybody else in the whole of European football between the two of them.
In history in the Premier League, they've broken the record, haven't they, for that?
Yeah, so between them two as well, they've been playing really well. So those teams, they seem to be getting better, not worse, with the last 10 games. So it'll be tough. It'll be tough.
100%. I think Chelsea are nailed on for Champions League football now with the ascendancy they're on. I think Spurs have been absolutely outstanding the past few matches I've watched. They've been really enjoyable football as well, Everton, I don't know what to say about Everton. I don't want to say anything nice, but Carlo Ancelotti is a genius, isn't he? Everyone's known that for a long time. It's mad to think that, in 2015 when we were in Istanbul, it was against Ancelotti,
Yeah.
That's how long he's been at it. He knows a thing or two, So, I don't know. I'm clinging on to the idea that we'll get some form of Europe. I think we could possibly, if we can stabilize the ship after this international break, I think we could possibly get 6th. And like I said, I don't know who that sacrifice is. What's really difficult now is the fact that you're right, there's 10 games left, It's like, if you can get it steady, well, how much time have you left yourself, really? So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I wouldn't put any money on anyone finishing anywhere apart from City at the top.
They've won it. They've won it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pop off. I'll let you two talk about the Wales international football debacle that's going on at the moment, and see how they get on in the next few weeks. Just a quick shout out. Thomas Bryce is on Sunday nights on Sport and Arium. He's our American friend with Sport and Arium USA. He's on at I think it's 11 p.m. our time, 6 p.m. American time. He talks obviously baseball, basketball, bit of everything that's in America at the moment. Just a quick shout out to him. So I'll leave you guys here to talk about the Welsh team, and I'll come back on a bit later, and I'll speak to you later.